Okay, this is OverSight episode 21, and usual host, Thorin, Monte Cristo, usual co-host. Been getting in a bit of trouble recently, have you?
Not me.
No, you say that, Monty, but you did one of those tweets where it was just like another day on the internet. So, you've been feeling the brunt. Here's the thing, actually. Let's talk about this at the top, okay, Monty? Because we're going to get to all that QXC shit at the end of the show, right? Before that, we're going to talk about the real Overwatch League and actual fucking games that matter, not just community drama. But one thing I did want to address at the top is this, Monty. Since we're introducing you again to the audience, I don't think you realise why you're in the firing line for all this abuse, which is this. Remember that company called Riot and that league called the NALCS, right?
I do.
Well,
I also remember a team called TSM.
And a team called Renegades, for that matter. But anyway, so when they used to have the NALCS and Riot and all the rest of it, and we all used to be a part of it, one of the famous sort of qualities of the way Riot handled things is, unless it was literally like an official PR post, you wouldn't actually get official comment from Riot or anything. What you'd get is people who worked for Riot would sometimes comment to Reddit, and then they even explicitly would say, like, I'm just addressing this as not as an official response from Riot. I'm just here as a person who's giving my thoughts or some inside info. And unfortunately, this rule will hold forever, Monty. People will always attack the messenger. So the problem is, I know in your capacity, you're thinking, well, I'm just a commentator in the league. Like, I'm not literally I didn't decide this. But unfortunately, since there isn't sort of a lightning rod figurehead for everyone to direct their abuse to, they're just going to direct it to you. They're going to. It's going to happen, mate. I'm telling you, that's the problem. It's going to happen.
Just tweet at Nate Dancer and at Overwatch League, please. I do not make these decisions.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Commissioner is on Twitter. Talk to him, please.
That's the problem, though. Nate Dancer actually has figured it out. Just by rarely ever tweeting, people just assume he doesn't check his Twitter, so he doesn't get that much abuse, does he? I agree. Just tweet at Nate Dancer. In fact, any thoughts you have on the game, if you have some tips on how to balance like fucking Zenyatta or something, just tweet him to Nate Dancer. He'll take care of everything.
No, he's not a developer. Don't do that.
Just do any thoughts you have on the world at large. Nate Dancer's there for you guys. He cares about this community, okay? And he's very much embedded in a part of it, because I could even joke it, but this is probably true, because he had an NAS when he was in the 1980s or something. I don't know. It's normally this fucking story with every American. Like, I'm huge into gaming. Yeah, I used to play Mario as a boy. Like everyone then. Just literally every fucking male who was a boy in the West for the last 30 years. Or, I love the stories, Monty. Have you ever seen it where like a modern day streamer, someone who's like 23, will be like, yeah, I used to play Super Mario when I was a kid. Like, how fucking cheap are your parents? What? So they were buying you like a fucking NES when it like what, 1995 or something? Like, the shit came out in the early 80s. What were they doing? Like, why weren't you playing Super Mario 64, the Nintendo? Your parents are just going to a flea market, aren't they? I don't know why that's never the follow-up. I guess here's the problem, Monty. I've just realised my flaw. I never ask those questions because I find them really boring. I should.
Wait. Yeah. You just realized your flaw.
No, that's just a flaw. No, my flaw is that I don't ask those questions, because I would actually ask them in a way that's better than they do. Like, my follow-up would be straight fire, wouldn't it? Like, why were you playing Mario, the original Super Mario Brothers? That game's very outdated, and it sounds like you're lying and just telling me a famous trope of gaming. Even if someone said Tomb Raider, even that would be like when half these people are born. Michael, what year were you born in?
95.
I think Tomb Raider came out in 1995. Let me have a look here.
I think it did.
Must have. Yeah,
I think it did. It was 95 or 96.
Yeah,
he was in the gold. He was born into the golden age of N64, PlayStation.
1996. So you were 1 year old when Tomb Raider came out. Exactly. Right. Anyway. So now that we've referenced him, we brought him into the chat, Monty. Let's just move over to that. So Michael here was formerly a player, still has aspirations to be a player. This is so long ago. It's like, was he really a player? But I know everyone says that like the original first 2 years were real Overwatch, Monty. I have my suspicions. Some would say they had a better circuit. Well, who knows? He was obviously a DPS flex player for Kungarna and the leader of that team. And then you might remember what happened with this Kungarna team is they were like up and comers, everyone's like, oh, where's this team going? And then great news. part of them got signed by TSM. So you're probably thinking like, right, this must be a great story here. No, that's it. Because what happened is, because part of them got signed by TSM then sort of like acted as some sort of mad gatekeeper to prevent about a rotating cast of about 25 players from actually getting contracts in professional Overwatch. I referenced all this in a video that I did about them. And mykL here was one of the victims of that, Monty, because even though he was with Kungarna before, TSM just straight up wouldn't sign him and Baby Bear. Now, that Baby Bear guy luckily didn't go on to be a good player or anything, you know, so TSM, as usual, straight on the money. Like Derek Trong, you did a fucking straight fire job, mate. As the joke I made in my video was, Monty, they literally, like basically everyone they didn't sign almost went on to be, like, good player, you know, go to other squads. Like they literally could have made about 5 squads out of the players they didn't sign, but, like, claimed they were going to and trialed in TSM. It was actually unreal. So, mykL, you were involved with all that mess, right? You were with the Kungarna guys, but then you were, like, sat out briefly after that, right?
Well, we went on to join another team, the 3 players that didn't sign with TSM.
Okay. So then why did you not continue on as a pro player then? Because most of the players we're talking about, I mean, with some notable exceptions, like people like Ajax, understandably, might have made some missteps in their careers that prevented them from getting the Overwatch League. I'm not saying I condone that. I'm just saying when you make enough mistakes, they do pile up. So why didn't you end up being like someone who's in the Overwatch League or in a contenders team or something? Why has that not happened yet?
Well, I did play in contenders, season 0 and 1.
Right, yes, the pre-season one, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get any Overwatch League trials because, I mean, I didn't have a good standing in the community. I had, like, a pretty bad reputation from, like, a player standpoint and
deservedly
fan
so, right?
or viewer standpoint. I mean, yeah, you can say that.
Well, I don't know. Just because you like to shit talk doesn't mean anything.
No,
you were a good sport about
here's the
your
thing,
shit
Monty,
talking.
I'm not saying like deserved in terms like he shouldn't have got a spot, but I'm saying like the reputation is deserved. Obviously, he has gone out of his way to talk shit. In fact, one of the reasons why I first got to notice you is that because obviously like there's a million players who were playing in that era is because I saw all these YouTube videos you did. And by the way, one thing that he's doing a very good job with, Monty, is even the videos are real analysis. Like, you know, it's his real thoughts on a topic or like analysis of a player. He has mastered like the fucking, I call it the Call of Duty style of YouTubing, where basically like everything's like capital letters and like fucking exclamation points and the title. You can't make the title like, yeah, no, but the good part of it, the title won't just be like, you know, what I think about this player, because that is a shit title. The best title is like, you won't believe why this guy won't ever be in the Overwatch League. It's like, holy shit, yes, click on that, click on that.
He is making clickbait videos pretty hard right now, but
he's doing a good job.
But you're doing a good job. What can I say?
Hey, you know, you're selling content, you got to clickbait, right?
Okay, here's the question though. So before we start, the reason why I have to ask, normally I don't give that much of an intro, but I have to set the scene here for people because people are later on going to judge your opinions and relative to which players you think are good or bad. So here's the question I have for you, mykL, is with your persona, and I know a bit about this myself, sometimes when you have an online persona, what's fun about having a persona is it's like being a character in the game. You don't have to like be whoever you are in real life and admit all your flaws or weaknesses. Like, you're not obliged to be like, I was an all right player who hopes I can make it again. So your online persona is that you think you're sick at the game and that, like, you know, you think loads of other people are bad, etc. How do you actually think for real that you were like a really good player?
Oh yeah, I was full of myself, definitely. Like,
no, but you still to this day, do you maintain that? Like, should you be in the Overwatch League?
I haven't played in a while. I haven't taken the game seriously. When I played seriously and took the game seriously, yeah. But to this day, nah. I mean, like, obviously, if I put effort and time into the game, I believe I could get back to that level and compete with other players. But like at this very moment, nah.
Okay. Because I wondered.
So you're more focused on the content creation side now, as well.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff.
Because I wanted to set the stage there, because then obviously if you criticize a player, people are going to try and, like, if they think that you think you're a really good player, they're going to be like, well, he's better than you and he's in the league. Like, I have to say this, by the way, to anyone who's like, especially if you're no longer in the playing side of things for now, that's a mistake to ever get drawn into those conversations. There's a reason why I never get wrecked on Twitter. Like, you don't ever have pro players messaging me like, you're shit at the game, because I never address it on that level. I always make it like, no, I am terrible at the game. I'm terrible at all games, in fact. In fact, compared to any pro player, I'd be really bad. But you know what? I'm not attempting to play the game. I'm attempting to think and talk. And guess what? At thinking and talking, I'm like fucking Jodak compared to you boys. So you better watch yourself. Be on your P's and Q's, you know, because you guys will wreck me with a little shake of the old wrist fibers and a fucking left click. But that's not what works in this domain, son. So Right, on that note, let's start the episode. So, obviously, we've had a lot of interesting results going on. I want to start here, Monty. Everyone for the last, let's say 5-6 episodes, everyone has talked as though it was a foregone conclusion that the LA Gladiators are basically bottom of the league, drifting down to the bottom end, not that good a team anymore. But they obviously did make this massive acquisition, getting Fisher, right?
I think that
turned their team around, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I think that getting one of the top 2 main tanks in the world suddenly on your roster is a little bit more than a massive upgrade, right? That's like a blockbuster level trade move.
But I mean, the reason why I think this is so interesting is because I actually have to say, I'll give credit to some of the people who've been on the show before. This really does say something about the aspect of how important having a really good tank is in the Overwatch League, because they didn't make that many changes other than that. Yet all of a sudden, a team that was drifting down to they were going to be a bottom 4 team for the conceivable future, is beating top level teams, and suddenly everyone looks better on the team just by this one guy coming in.
Well, that's what happens, I think, when you have a fantastic main tank who's creating a lot of space for the DPS. I don't want to just give it entirely to Fisher, though, so there are a few things that happened. One of them is that they started to figure out how to properly rotate their 3 DPS players into the games and figure out which maps they're more comfortable having each combination of the 3 players on. So, sometimes we see Asher and Hydration, sometimes we see Surefour and Asher, sometimes we see Surefour Hydration. And so they figured out the maps that they want to run these 2 players on to give them flexibility and play to their strengths. I think that Asher himself has gotten significantly better, and potentially part of that is that the coordination with him at a Korean main tank, where he's able to play Tracer around fissures and gauges, and maybe communication is a bit better between him and the main tank, which might be increasing their effectiveness as a team. So I think all of these things are coming up. We knew Shaz and Big Goose were always good. Bishu spent a lot of time outside of his mech beforehand, which obviously is not the way that you play off tank. Fissure has helped him stay in his mech a lot more. And the other thing that we've seen from the Gladiators over this stage has been since they got Fissure, they started playing basically exclusively dive at the start of the stage in week 1. And then by week 3 now, at the end of week 3, they started running a whole lot more strategies. Nobody would have predicted that they would have come in this week and run so many different compositions. But I think what they were doing is they were getting their communication and teamwork and synergy down with one comp, and now they feel comfortable enough to start opening it up to other things. So they're looking really good right now.
Yeah. Okay, what do you think of the LA Gladiators team, Michael?
Well, they definitely upgraded in their main tank position. I think that was their biggest issue in stage 1. Remix just wasn't making the right decisions at the right time, constantly. So he was getting caught out, and that was the reason why Bishu was out of mech a ton. So Fisher obviously did help with that. And you nailed the spot on with Asher being able to work with Fisher. It's a completely different team with him and Fisher working together. As for the DPS players, I felt like they were flexing them around too much. We saw Surefour playing Projectile, we saw him playing Hit Scan, saw him playing Tracer. He was dabbling in every single DPS role. Well, we saw Asher also flexing onto Hit Scan and stuff. So I felt they needed to focus in on Hydration being their main Projectile, Hit Scan for Surefour, and then just a Tracer for the Asher. And they started doing that last week, and they did really good. And yeah, they're now flexing a little bit more. I think Surefour just needs to be the one who flexes a ton on that team, and then just leave Hydration on the Genji and the Pharah, and then Asher completely Tracer or Widow.
Where do you think they actually stack up at the moment then? Because obviously, they started, it's hard to know where they were after the first week. Now they've had all these big wins. Where do you think they actually should be in the league?
Well, I mean, they are looking like the best Western team right now, but obviously that changes every week. 2 weeks ago it was Philly, 3 weeks ago it was Houston.
Yes.
So it's are they going to be consistent at it? That's really what matters, but they are the only Western team who really has a chance of making Stage 2 playoffs right now. So we'll have to see.
They also, I'm curious because while their win against London was definitely impressive, the GC Busan roster that London has been running against their weaker opponents in the last couple of weeks, because what London has done they've said that they've split their roster to focus, so they can focus on, each roster can sort of look at one of the two maps, and the only players that play both games are Gesture and Prophet, and the rest of the players are more dedicated to one map or another. And so they've been keeping the old GC Busan core together, and it seemed to me that when London went down 0-2 against the Gladiators with GC Busan, and they started bringing in some of the players from the other half of their roster, which we'll just, for ease sake, we'll call the Kongdu half, then I don't know if those players had actually practiced like for the Gladiators specifically, or they just got swapped in because they were down 0-2. And I think that's a huge burden to have the better performing half of their roster have to reverse sweep in order to win a series. I think that's kind of unreasonable to put them in that situation. They did win a map in the end against the Gladiators, but it is worth noting that the Gladiators did play on the against the weaker of the two London lineups, but they also did beat them pretty convincingly. So
yeah. So basically, are they doing this because they themselves thought that Gladiators were a weaker team and this was a way to just test something else out?
I would assume that's what they thought, because they probably had practice for the week coming in, thinking the Gladiators were not going to just stomp the Valiant and look as good as they are. They probably came in not realizing that they were going to run so many different kinds of compositions, because that was a huge surprise against the Valiant, how many different team comps they ran that they had not run previously. They gave us entirely new looks on attack and defense on virtually all of their maps. So at that point, you get sort of nervous, because it's very difficult to prepare for a team that suddenly explodes with that many different strategies in 1 week. So that was probably something else that caught them off guard. Caught me off guard, for sure.
Well, then, how about this then? If they were able to beat Spitfire, but with those caveats included, they have, I think, let me have a look. I think they've played, so they've lost to Seoul already, and they haven't played New York. They
do not play New York this stage.
Oh, they do not. Oh, never mind then. Right. Well, okay. Well, maybe they'll make the playoffs though.
I think they have a really good shot of making the playoffs now, because they don't play New York and they beat London. So
what about
their Seoul games out of the way too?
If they play against a team like New York Excelsior, would they have a chance to match up against them?
I don't think so, but New York, do you want to talk about New York more in depth right now?
I mean, I would just say cursory comments, then we'll talk about them next if you want.
All right. I don't think so. I think New York is too adaptable at the moment. Okay. I think they'll be able to read them, and especially now the Gladiators have shown a lot more. They have to continue to innovate and be unpredictable in order to be able to take down New York, I think.
Okay. Right, well, let's talk about the New York team now then. So, Michael, give us your thoughts first.
Oh, also, here's the other reason. Usually teams that don't play each other in a stage are primary scrim partners, and I don't know this about New York and Gladiators, but I do know that in the past when teams have not, like last stage when teams didn't play each other, you saw them, like I think it was New York and San Francisco were scrimming a lot together because they didn't play each other last stage. So
also, I would go ahead and assume with people like Bishu who literally speak Korean that they have a way better in to potentially get practice with the full Korean teams anyway. So they always tend to like reconnect with all those people. So, okay, Michael, what do you think about the New York Excelsior team?
Well, real quick on the London game, I wanted to say I think their coaching staff kind of mismanaged it, because if you look at the map pool, the two of the first three maps, Kings Row and Lijiang Tower, are like London Spitfire's absolute worst maps. Like they lose it with their Kongdu roster, their A team all the time. So I think they should have expected to, run their strongest team, try to win the set. It was a little weird that they ran the GC Busan roster, in my opinion. But New York, I think they're like talent-wise, they're the most stacked roster. They just have a problem when it gets to the moment where they need to show up and perform. For some reason, they just lose at that moment. And I honestly don't understand why. I don't know if it's a mental block at this point, but that's what we saw in LW Blue. And we saw it last stage, so it's kind of where
there's only a few members of LW Blue and that are on the roster. I agree with you that maybe that's part of it. That could be part of the issue. We've only seen one stage playoffs though. I think what's so scary to me, New York right now, I casted both of their games. I've been casting a lot of New York games recently. I cast the last three actually matches for them. And I think what's so interesting about New York is that they are becoming incredibly adaptable when it comes to team compositions and their play style. So what they do now is for the first time, teams actually have a wealth of film on their opponents. So in stage 1, you couldn't come in with a lot of film because most of these teams were new or had cores of old teams but had a bunch of new players, so you didn't really know how they were going to play the game. It was an entirely new meta that people hadn't seen before or really played professionally at this level, with the Mercy coming in, so you couldn't even rely on old film of the core rosters for the most part. And now we have 5 weeks of film from the first stage, and now we have 2 weeks of film from this stage. And I think that the better coaching staff of the teams have started to pick apart their opponents. And I think that's very evident in the way that New York has been playing recently. We didn't have a show last week, so to go back to the Houston game, they basically entirely changed their play style. So when we think about stage 1 New York, like Houston, they were a very defensive team. And Sabielby would primarily be focusing DPS and opening up space for Jonak to, with a damage boost from the Mercy, frag out on his opponents. But the way they played against Houston was entirely different in that they were targeting Raucus. Sabielby was going into the back line and fucking with Raucus and basically daring Jake to take care of him or win the Tracer duels, which Jake did not. So that in an interview after that match, Ark was saying that the supports are often on their own now in the new meta, so they've already started to adapt both to the meta and to their opponent's weakness. Then we come back this week, and we see them play against Philadelphia, and that's a very close series, and I think Philadelphia played really well. But you see that they changed their play style again in that they were playing much more conservatively, and they were waiting for Philadelphia to dive and backing off and picking them off when they dove. So instead of diving the back line themselves, they were pulling back as a group and punishing Philadelphia's positioning, especially Fraggy going in. They would isolate him and kill him and basically counter the dive by retreating briefly, targeting one player, and then re-engaging after that. But additionally, they had counter comps that were prepared for basically everything that Philadelphia had shown previously on these maps. And it wasn't only that they had these counter comps planned, they even knew what Philadelphia was going to change to, what their available options were for their players to switch heroes to adapt to New York's comps. And then they would immediately adapt to that as well. So it was like a 2-level plan that they had going into that match. And it was impressive to watch. Like their ability to understand a game plan given to them by their coaches and execute by changing their team compositions and tactics to get an advantage team by team, I think is second to none in the league right now.
Okay. Because one of the things I thought was interesting was, okay, they've obviously already played London, and London won that game with a close one this stage, and obviously that's the team.
They didn't have Ark, though,
yes,
critically.
Okay. But, and they play Seoul, I know, this week. Well,
that's going to be very exciting.
Sunday, but yeah, next week. But one of the factors when you watch them play is, like, it's not even overhyped, like, how ridiculous Sabielby's style on Tracer is. Like, there's so few teams, I think, in the entire league could actually deal with that. Like, everyone, I mean, you can do your best against it, but is there really any sort of counter to that right now?
Well, but his style of Tracer is changing. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like he just battles the Tracers now.
The DPS now, right?
No, he's going after the supports depending on the opponent. He heavily targeted the supports versus Houston. mykL was a Tracer player at one point in time. So what do you think about Sabielby's Tracer style when you watch him play?
Well, like you said, it is changing. Like last stage would just go for those Tracer battles, and unless you didn't have a Tracer that could really stand to him and check him, he was just free reign. So like Jake really struggled, obviously. Not much he could do. He can't protect Raucus at all. Right now, though, like it's really kind of on the divas, I guess. If SBB, you know, the guy's not going to miss a kill on a Zenyatta if he gets the opportunity, right? So you need somebody to be there to protect him. And with Mercy out of the meta now, can't really pocket him and keep him alive. So I think it's really on the divas right now to help your backline stay alive, if that's the style you want to play. Or you can do the full aggressive dive play. But that's pretty much how I look at it.
So if we're looking for a team that has a good diva then to battle New York, who should we be looking at?
Well, I mean, Envy's a good diva. Fury's a good diva.
Oh, Envy, the player, right? Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
No, not Mickey. Not Mickey.
Yeah, okay.
God. Yeah, no, Fury from like London. I think there's a lot of actually good divas in the league that, but it just depends on like the play style of the team. I don't know if like a lot of the teams right now want to play a counter dive style, so it's kind of more just leaving your supports on the back line, and your Zenyatta's got to fend for your own.
I mean, Houston should want to play that style because I think it suits them better. And Coolmat is a very good diva player. But the problem with Houston was that they did not, I don't think they expected New York to be, first off, they're in a bit of a slump, and I don't think they're playing that well as a team compared to stage one, partly because of the meta, partly because I think they're just slumping in general. But when we look at Houston, they didn't really adapt to what New York was doing. I don't think they expected New York to play like that. I mean, nobody really could have expected New York to play like that going into the Houston game because we hadn't seen that from them before. But they didn't make any kind of adaptation. Like you said, it wasn't Cool Matt going there. It was basically, I don't know if this was Jake saying, no, guys, like I can do it. I can protect Raucus, but that was just not happening.
Because one thing that's actually ridiculous is like New York has lost 5 games, and 3 of those were to London.
Yep.
So it's not like they're just winning the series; they're just wrecking everyone.
I mean, they're extremely good. They've lost 5 games this stage.
Yes, obviously. I mean, listen, Monty, I realize you guys are fucking forced to think that way. Like, but the overall standings, like, I can't do that, man. I just live in the stage, and then I come back out of the stage and go, all right, the overall rankings.
We discussed format in the last show.
Yes.
I know it's confusing.
It's just tilt-worthy, because to me, I think of the stages, I want to see how people succeed in that, you know. I
agree. I think it's much more interesting to take it stage by stage, but we're not going to talk about format. Sure. We did talk about that for like 45 minutes in the last episode. You go back and watch it there if you want.
Was it notable that... Oh, actually, no, one more question before we go back. So one of the things that people wondered about, though, as we came into this stage with the meta shift, was would, for example, in a meta where you aren't playing Mercy all the time, what would happen to someone like Jonak, for example? Would he be able to have all these ridiculous games with mad damage stats, and would it be as easy?
He just gets nano boost and now
hasn't changed, right? It's still living in that life. It's it's Jonak's world. We just live in it.
It is interesting because we thought that Arc, the reasonable conclusion, I think, coming into stage 2, because Jonak was previously on the top of the world ladder as an Ana player, was that Jonak would go back to playing Ana, right? He would be the Ana player. They would move Arc, who traditionally on LW Red was a Lucio player, over to Lucio. You'd have Ana Lucio, maybe some Zenyatta still. However, interestingly, New York still runs a shit ton of Ana. They run more Ana than they do Lucio, and they play Zenyatta basically 100% of the time. So Jonak didn't change his hero at all because he's so fucking good at Zenyatta. What they did was Arc started to play the Ana, and he's, instead of having a Mercy Beam to protect him all the time, he now is just defending Jonak with sleep darts, which has actually been working. And then even on occasion, he will nano boost Jonak and send Jonak in there, and just Jonak's aim and ability to frag out will win the day, basically. So,
which is a pretty unique way to use the Zenyatta, right?
Yes, I think nano boosting your Zenyatta and having him go into the front line is a crazy way to run him. To put this in perspective, when they played yesterday, so I was casting that match last night when they played against San Francisco, he had 23 final blows on the Shock DPS. He was basically like out-fragging the Shock DPS. So when they came for him, he was killing them. And he had 40 final blows overall across the entire series. That's crazy for a Zen.
Yeah.
So just to put this in perspective, so last split, it was Sabielby's job to shut down the enemy DPS. This stage, Jonak is left to his own devices with Arc more than he was previously, but he is also killing the enemy DPS instead. So somebody's still killing them. It's just changed to being Jonak.
This is why the New York team, I realize obviously they didn't even win the last stage, so technically they're not unbeatable and they have lost already here, but the reason why they feel unbeatable is because, I mean, on both these players so far, it's like, well, they're doing something different. What's the solution? What's the counter? It's like, how many more luxuries do you want? They already have too many good players. They've got too many options, right?
It's pretty crazy how stacked that roster is right now. I think that it's not like everybody is a superstar level player. You pick out the really excellent players on that roster. I think you talk about Sabilby, I think you talk about Jonak, and I think you talk about mykL. But Libero is versatile enough that he can enable compositions, and he doesn't have to be a star DPS player. He just has to be a flexible DPS player and do the job, and he does that beautifully. Arc has been great, but he's not at the same level of Jonak in terms of game presence, but his job is to enable Jonak, and he does that really, really well.
I mean, funnily enough, this is an example of why I never bought the idea that all these Western teams were just going to stay Western and not recruit Korean players. Because first of all, as we've already seen, a guy who was a fucking backup on the Spitfire actually turns out to be like one of the best tanks in the whole league. And
we knew that. We knew that beforehand, though.
No, but the point is, someone who is a backup on a Korean team is better than all the fucking starters on the Western teams.
But that's why he's no longer a backup. It was like he
should never have been a backup from day one.
He was way too good.
That's the point. He should never have been a backup.
But I don't think he ever intended to be a backup. Remember that roster, the Kongdu players were signed to Cloud9 before GC Busan was. So I don't think Fissure was like, when he signed his contract, he wasn't like, oh, this gesture guy is going to come in later. And it just happened that they got the two best tanks in the world on the roster.
Yep. But the point is, this is why it is ridiculous to think that all the Western teams will be like, I will just get talent from North America. It's like, unless literally these Koreans cannot speak a word of English, there's no point doing that. Like, they're so much better. Like in this example here that we're talking about, Libero on any other team would be like a star player. People would be like, wow, look at all the things he can do. Here, they've just taken the aspect that he had played so many different heroes, and they're like, let's only use that feature. You are not a star at all, but you will round out all these comps. Like, what a ridiculous luxury again to have as like someone you don't even have to use every game.
Yeah.
Well,
meanwhile, every other team, all the mainly Western ones, have like, fairly set win conditions. Like, what players they're going to use in what roles. There's not as much wiggle room,
You were going to say, Michael?
Well, I mean, like, there's good Western players in the league that deserve to be there and, have huge impacts on their team who are better than some Koreans. It's just that there's more Koreans that are good at the game than there are Western players.
If you were to add a player like Libero to play with one of those amazing Western DPS players, wouldn't that be a fucking great team?
Yes.
That's my point, by the way. It's not that there's not good players. Obviously, that's a ridiculous argument. Like, my point is the notion that like you could just fill your whole team with Westerners. Like, even if one team does it, like the Outlaws, okay, cool, you managed it. You're the one team. But for the rest of the teams, as you've seen with the Gladiators example, it doesn't really make sense to just like forcibly have to only get these Western. Like, get one or two Korean. In fact, just get an amazing Korean that plays the one thing that you can't get at the moment. And then fill out the team with whoever the fuck you want, And to me, that makes a lot more sense. The reason why I'm saying this, Michael, is because you have to realize, coming into the Overwatch League, there were literally owners of Western orgs who were like, I'm never going to go that route. Like, because it's almost like a pride thing. They were like, I don't want to be the guy who recruits Koreans. It's like, well, good luck losing, then see you, mate. You're not
Meanwhile, Jack from C9's like, this is my dream. I've always dreamed of being able to have an entirely Korean roster. It's like, finally, I spent years angling my way through League of Legends trying to figure out how I could get NA residents before Riot changes the residency rules so I could get maximum Koreans.
That's
and then he goes super ham. He's like, I will not only buy one, I will buy two full Korean teams.
Yeah, this is something a lot of people might not know, but it's probably worth mentioning, actually. In League of Legends, I mean, this never actually came to pass for two reasons. One, because of the residency issues, and secondly, it actually just so happened that one of the players in question didn't fit the team, so they didn't go with him in the end. But in League of Legends, after a couple of seasons, they made a rule which said like you basically can't have a full team of like import players. So you can't have 5 Koreans, you can't have 5 Chinese players, because this had happened. They'd had
you can only have
Chinese
2
team.
non-residents.
And so what they did was they did make this interesting like caveat though, which is that even though you're an import, if you lived in America for enough times, I think it was 2 years, you were allowed, after declaring that you were going there, you were allowed after 2 years to choose to change your region. So it's not that you weren't an import, it's that you became American basically. And as a result, by the way, this never happened, but if you'd have gone back to Korea, for example, you would technically have been an import there. Now, it wouldn't matter, obviously, because they're not importing NA players. But in this scenario, right, Jack from Cloud9, who originally hadn't, funny, this is going to be a great tie-in. He had the best Western team. He had all North American players that fit together really well. There were good players at all their roles. And within the context of being a Western team, they were one of the best teams, actually. But when it came time to change those players, because, you know, he had basically the best case scenario for a Western team, he started to import players. So he got like star player as his mid laner. From Europe, he got a star player, not really a star, but it became a star as a top laner. And when he brought in these foreign players, one of his goals, actually, when he found out about this residency idea, this is what a fucking G this guy was he actually figured out, right, wait a minute, so they have to have lived there roughly 2 years. So he literally started building his roster so that what he could have done if they hadn't have actually changed the residency rules, like just before this would have happened, is he was making it so that he had the player who was the best of the Korean imports, but who'd been there the longest, and he signed him, and then he had a Korean jungler as well. And what he was basically going to do was, once the residency kicked in, just get more and more Koreans and basically get around the import rules. So as we're referencing here, not only is that obviously like a good approach anyway if they work, but to tie back into Monty's point, he doesn't have to do that in this game. He can just get all Koreans.
I just like how Jack made like a multi-year plan about how to get 3 Koreans on his team instead of 2, and then they changed the rules so that Impact wouldn't get residency after he had signed the contracts for these players. So he got mega wrecked.
To this day, I still cite that. I mean, what's funny is to other people, it's not a big deal, but I still consider that one of the most corrupt things Riot ever did. Switch up the rules that people literally worked as a general manager to plan out your entire... That's like if in a franchise, you remember those years it happened in the NBA where people made cap space to try and sign like LeBron James or some superstar player. Imagine you did that for 3 years. You know, you had like years where you weren't that good, or you couldn't sign a player because you were waiting and you were trying to like, you know, like I don't want to get too many contracts tied up. And then just before the year when you were about to like have space to get the best player in the entire world, they were like, yeah, we're changing the rules on all that, actually. You can't do that anymore. And he was like, what? That's what they literally did. And even worse,
that is what they did.
Sadly, this was never abused at the time, but they also literally made it so that players before they made this ruling were allowed to just be grandfathered in as being residents anyway. So they made the number 1 team in NA, which was TSM. They, in theory, could have abused this rule all day long and have Bjergsen, who was a European player, as just an NA resident, and could have just stacked 2 other imports. So
I mean, they're doing that right now.
They are in theory, yeah, but yeah, that's how fucking that is. So anyway, right, to come back to the topic at hand. So far,
we like no region locking. It's much more interesting.
Obviously, we have New York playing Seoul Dynasty next week, tomorrow. You know, the next week, as in it's Sunday today. So, Michael, here's the question: when we had who was on last week's episode?
Super, I think.
Yes, Super. He said that he thought this is actually the meta for Seoul Dynasty, and he actually thought that Seoul Dynasty can be the best team as a result. Will Seoul Dynasty beat New York Excelsior next week? What do you think, Michael?
I'm on the belief that Seoul Dynasty will probably win this stage. This game's definitely up in the air. It's really hard to say because New York has looked great in this meta as well. They've adapted really well. They're playing a different type of play style. And I think they're definitely going to be prepared for Seoul. It's tough to say who's going to win this match, honestly. But I do think at the end of the stage, I don't see New York winning the stage. I even see London winning over New York in this stage as well. But I think Seoul, this is their meta for sure. And Miro's playing out of his mind right now. Like the guy went from down fucking here all the way up here in one stage. Munchkin as well.
That's true. I think Seoul has gotten a lot better. I think Miro was, like you say, underperforming in stage 1. Historically, he had been playing much better. Munchkin also, we talked about how Seoul needed a real second DPS threat. And I don't think Flood is playing as well this stage as he did previously, but that's been picked up a lot by Munchkin. So Seoul is still looking good. I guess my concern with Seoul, I think New York will probably be in a better place to contest this time. I don't think we're going to keep seeing them choking or getting reverse swept in any kind of playoff. I'm really excited about the match next week. And what I think Seoul does well is, well, I talked earlier about how New York adapts well with their compositions to counter opponents. What Seoul does, and what Lunatic High always did well, was they won't change their composition, but they will change their positioning and their tactics in the game. So when they start to digest you, when you, like an enemy team, when they first see you approach an objective or attack them for the first time, and a lot of the Soul's games, Soul is excellent on Assault for this reason. So they play a lot of time bank on Assault, going past the initial 2 points, because they do tend to give some ground at first. But the thing is, the second time you attack them, or the second time that they attack you, they've already adapted to your positioning. So even though they're not necessarily changing their heroes, because I do think they're more limited in the compositions they can run than New York is currently, even though they're more limited, they will change how they position, where they attack you, who they target, as they start to understand your weaknesses. So it's like the longer you play against Seoul in a map, the better they play against you, which I think is super dangerous. New York doesn't have that same level of flexibility in terms of tactics, but what they will do is they'll just change their entire composition and try and deal with you in a different way. So that's going to make this match this week fucking amazing, probably, because to see these two styles go at each other is going to be a real treat to watch.
Okay. So you touched on some of it there, Michael. What's the improvement for Seoul? Because obviously they're the Korean team who lost tons of games last stage and actually lost entire matches, whereas this time, they've won every match. Bizarrely, they do lose like one map every time, but to everyone, but they're still dominant overall. So what's changed about the Seoul Dynasty?
Well, in the last minute, it was a lot of Mercy, and I think they are more comfortable, their supports and their backline on that Lucio, Zenyatta, Lucio, Ana type play. And again, Miro just really stepped up. Like, the guy went back, he looked at his film, talked with his coaches. Whatever the fuck they did, it was a miracle, because his play, in my opinion, went up like from a 50 to a 98 or something. And that second DPS threat was obviously a huge issue. I thought Wakid was like a really good Genji in stage 1. And when they did play him, he looked pretty good. But like, they never just had an effective tracer. Somebody who could, go in the other team's backline, get kills on their own, make space. And because of Miro being bad, they couldn't work together. So throwing that in the mix, I think they're more versatile now. They have more threats, and yeah, that's pretty much it. As for New York, also to his point with Seoul Dynasty, like adapting mid-game, not with their comp, but like their playstyle, we do see that on 2CP all the time. Especially there was their Dallas Fuel match on Hanamura. They completely picked them apart. It was ridiculous how they shut them down on Dallas Fuel's attack. Because I think Dallas Fuel had like 6 minutes and 30 seconds to cap that point. Something ridiculous like that, and just every single attack, just real quick, they just destroyed them. Like, Dallas didn't even have a close team fight where they were gonna attempt a cap point.
How do you contrast the DPS of Dynasty against Spitfire, against Excelsior?
I think like Prophet and Birdring are just ridiculous together. Those guys are so flexible; they can play anything. And New York,
Seoul.
What?
Seoul, not London.
No, I'm asking how he contrasts the DPS, though.
Oh, but between London? Sorry.
No, between the three Korean teams.
Three Korean teams. Continue.
In the context of the
apologies, I misheard.
Of the Dynasty team. So I assume he's going to tie into that at the end. So okay, there's Spitfire. What about the Excelsior ones in contrast?
Then we have like Excelsior. They have Libero, like the super flex. SBB, just the guy who is so solid on Tracer. And for Seoul, like I said, they were lacking in that Tracer role. Somebody who could really contest SBB. And I don't know if Munchinkin is going to be able to hold up to that level in this match. But hopefully, their other parts of the team will make up for that.
Yeah. One thing, actually, this might sound like an abstract point, But I actually think, in a bizarre way, one thing that I actually have enjoyed about watching the Overwatch League, and obviously it's not necessarily until now that this was the case, but the fact that Overwatch, this is one thing people criticised initially, the fact that it had way more limited amount of basically characters you could play than all the big MOBA games. But I actually think that has ended up being a positive, because it makes it more, to me, like a traditional sport where actually the hero becomes the role, basically. And you have players like, oh, someone's going to have to play this position to match up with this guy. It's not like, first of all, in League, obviously, you don't have mirror matchups. That doesn't exist. That was only a very bizarre kink of the Korean scene. So you just have one, like you have all these matchups where first of all, you have to know like 5 different lane matchups. It's like if you don't understand the CS into that, you can't even comment on whether someone's winning in a lane or not. Then you have the whole scenario of take that concept and now apply it into comps where you have 2 different 5-man comps of totally different champions playing against each other with all the interactions. And then you add in a cycling meta where someone's an amazing player 1 month and then next month he's not as good because his heroes aren't in the game anymore. Like, I actually think in Overwatch it's a lot more streamlined in that sense. Like, you know roughly what people are going to play and you have a sense of like, right, we can stack up who the best tracers are and then who the best like tracer for this is and who the best tracer is, a tracer versus tracer player. Like, it actually makes it a lot more streamlined in terms of like being able to follow it as a sport, I think.
Yeah. Also, there's also nuance in there too, because we can talk about how the different styles of different tracer players or Winston players or diva players. So there is like there's still a lot of room for each player to have their individual flair and individual style on a hero, even in mirror matchups, which I think is quite interesting. And I also appreciate that you can get such expertise in one role, because obviously Tracer usually played, not always played, but usually played. And so a lot of these players are just super good at one hero, and that makes the interactions that they have with each other and the other heroes in the game more exciting as well. I also think we're finally getting to the point, to touch on what I said earlier about New York and the game in general, that with so much film, I felt like this stage in particular, we're really starting to see how teams prepared for each other and a new depth of strategy that we haven't really seen in Overwatch before, because it hasn't been as stable with week in, week out matches. This many players, depth of bench players from these teams, because even in Apex, you weren't seeing that many substitutions overall, not like we see now. So I think it's fascinating that the game's depth appears to be growing as teams get more comfortable in the Overwatch League practice environments. They're more comfortable using their substitute players. They're more comfortable having expanded coaching staff. And that is, I think that's really showing starting now in stage 2, because the level of play that we're seeing right now is just incredible.
Because, I mean, this actually reminds me more of actually Dota 2 than League of Legends. Because in Dota 2, generally, a bit like Counter-Strike, the top players, they stay the top players as long as they basically practice and don't just fade individually for some reason. Whereas in games like League of Legends, the turnover of players, even just like week to week, is ridiculous. Like the amount of like shake-up because of meta changes, differences in that sense, like you don't play the same champions all the time. I actually think one of the things I always liked about Dota was like basically in that game, even if something isn't like the most OP hero, if you're just the best at it, you can still make it work. Like you can just figure out how in your team to make it work and to run it anywhere. Yeah. And you don't get limited. It's not like, oh, this week you can no longer ever play that hero. It's like, what? So I actually think, and that's one thing I've enjoyed about Overwatch, because the only area that's really happened with is like, I guess tank and support sometimes get wrecked because things are either really good or really bad. But especially for like DPS and flex, you can pretty much play whatever you want all the time.
Well, there's also no bans, so that means that you can't ban Jonak from playing Zenyatta, which means that what I like about it, the no ban system or not being able to ban anything, is that Jonak can play Zenyatta every game or whatever, which means that if he is that much better at Zenyatta, what happens with New York is that they have now a character as a team. So it affects their style. They don't have to flex onto all these different supports if they don't want to. They can literally just design comps around Jonak, which is what they've been doing, but more so in stage 1 now than in stage 2. But you can play around star players and their abilities, and that creates a character for that team, like a cool storyline or a cool strategy that only they can run, because they're constantly allowed to play their best players on their peak heroes. So,
yeah, I always thought that was something that sucked about other games. Like, here's the thing, in Counter-Strike it never was that much of a problem because you still do get to play your best map, because what happens is anyone else who likes that map as well, because they get to play on it. It's not the same as League where, you know, you're just banning someone from playing that. The two top teams on Inferno agreed to play Inferno, you know, it's going to happen. But I always thought in League that was one of the stupidest concepts for an esport. It's great for the casual player. For casual player, being able to ban something super OP is a great concept, or that you just don't want to play against. But think about how terrible this is, right? So we're going to ban someone who's the best in the world at playing this champion, so just none of us get to see him play it. Amazing. Like, that would be like in fucking football. Yeah. Sorry, Messi's just too good in football as a striker. He's just banned from playing that. That's the player as a fucking defender now. Well, brilliant. Yeah, you've just ruined the whole game then. So let's not watch the best thing in the game. Let's just definitely not do that, shall we? Whose idea was that? Like as I said it up there, it's not actually the fault of the Riot. You know, like, that is just the way their game operates. But it's unfortunate for the esports side, certainly.
What's your guys' opinion on, like, map bans then?
Should exist, but
yeah.
Team 4, period, exclamation point.
I mean, for the same reason, sometimes it sucks that teams like Best Map can be banned, and so we don't get to see them play on it or see the cool strategies that they have. I think that I guess I would rather see loser picks like we had in Apex over the course of a series, so that you have the same limited map pool. So you limit the map pool like we have now to 9 maps, I guess, technically, with Ilios as our tiebreaker, but 8 standard maps. And then loser can pick between the two of the remaining, like the 2 maps that are in the pool for each map type.
Also, here's the thing, Monty. First of all, I actually personally would like a map pick ban system, because like I said in Counter-Strike, it's not actually as bad as like League, because for example, since you both get to play the map, what would happen is, yes, a very weak team could ban the best map of New York, for example. But first of all, if they do that, then they open themselves up to just get, you know, like some pick against them that's insane that they can't control against. So they have to sometimes ban something else, and they wouldn't be able to just ban the strength all the time. Like, you can't do that every single time.
Sure.
The strategy. But just generally, I like that as a system, because first of all, it allows gamesmanship with that, you know, what are we going to ban, etc. But here's the thing, just for the sake of a joke, I will say that I actually agree with you. I think that loser picks is better, and here's why, Monty. You're thinking like a humanitarian, like a compassionate individual. It's good because then the losing team can be like, right, we can pick this map, and then we have a chance. No, that's exactly why I want it, Monty. Basically, the punishment of Florida Mayhem and Shanghai Dragons must be more severe. Until their city is in ashes, they will, you know, I want them to literally not only lose every game, but for them to have played mainly the maps they wanted to play most of the time, and then to lose every game.
It is more humiliating that way, right?
Then their souls will absolutely be crushed and destroyed, and they'll have no excuse either. They can't even go like, oh, it was bad maps for this week. What are you on about? After the first game, it was your map all the time.
I think it's crazier, though, when a team wins on all of their opponents' maps, right?
It's pretty good, right?
Somebody,
yeah.
Pretty
That's
hype.
the best way to show you're dominant, for sure. Yeah. It's the same in Counter-Strike, by the way. In Counter-Strike, the ultimate way to show you the best team is just to win all your series 2-0. So you win your map pick and his map pick. So it doesn't matter what he's picking against you. If you can do that, you probably are the best team ever, you know. Like, at that point in time, they have no strategy against you, basically.
So what do you think about map drafts, Michael, as a former professional pro?
I like map drafts personally. It adds like another level to the game, right? Yeah, another like counterplay to beat the enemy team.
Sure.
As for like the Overwatch League, Stage 1 seemed really stale with the maps. I don't know why. Stage 2 seems like it's a lot better. Seems like there's more of a wide variety of maps, but there's like not. I do feel like the loser should be able to pick a map though, just because like it will give an opportunity for teams like Shanghai Dragons, Florida Mayhem, you know, to have better games potentially, or prepare to win more than just 0 or 1 maps in a set. And yeah, just the extra level of strategy. I think that's like a really good part and fun part of the game as a professional. And so as a spectator as well, someone who like understands that level of the game, it's really intriguing.
It also, by the way, again, like this is one of the problems actually with making formats, is you should never make a format to like help out a losing team, because you almost can't do it. Like, actually, anything that is a tool and has strategy involved benefits better teams because they're better at strategy. So, for example, even though, like as you said initially, people would think, oh, actually map bans might even help the losing team, because for example, if a team's amazing on it, you can ban them on it. It would hurt them more, because what would happen is at the moment you can just prepare for the maps that you know are going to be played, so the worst team actually at least know what's fucking map it is, whereas the best teams have the best map pools generally in most of these games where you have ban systems. And so what would happen is, yeah, New York doesn't know every map they're going to play in the series, but difference is the ones that like, you don't know what map is going to be played in the series either. So I'm going to put my chips on them being able to go everywhere in the map pool as opposed to your team. And also that makes it harder to practice, because the maps you don't practice as much, usually you have to be an amazing team to get the wins on those ones, you know, and you can't practice everything. That's another factor. That's actually I will say this, okay, one thing that would make it harder in Overwatch to have map bans is the number of maps that there are, because you have to practice a fucking lot.
Yeah, okay. So I actually think that it's impossible for pro players to be able to practice the number of maps in the pool right now.
You wouldn't be able to, I can tell you.
Which is why I think you have to do what they're doing now and every stage rotate the map pool and cut it down to 8 or 9 maps only to practice, because it's just too ridiculous otherwise. So even if we were to have a map drop system, it would still be a draft based off of a limited pool of maps, which is fine. I mean, we have entirely different maps except for Ilios. So we have 8 out of the 9 maps are new to this stage.
I think because that's the problem. I have to tell you, coming from Counter-Strike, because people often say this in Counter-Strike, hey, maybe we should put 2 new maps in the map pool. It's like, well, you do it, you have to replace 2, because if, for example, in Counter-Strike, we have a pool of 7, and obviously we play 2 or 3 maps in each series. I can tell you, 7's already too many. Like, every single team already has 1 they don't play, like 2 that, you know, they play like a tiny bit and they hope like these are the ones that won't get picked against them, or, you know, they end up getting good on them because people do pick them against them. Like, nobody can practice and be world class on all 7, because that's the key distinction you always have to make. Because you have a lot of, even a lot of fans of Counter-Strike naively say, well, why don't they just practice to get better on their 7th best map? It's like, that's not the point. It's not that they don't practice, it's that they would have to be as good on their 7th map as teams who are top 5 in the world on it. So what you're telling them is, why can't a team just be top 5 in the world on all 7? Well, you've just answered your own question there pretty much, haven't you? Like, it's pretty illogical they'd be able to. So I have to say, with as many as there are in Overwatch, you'd have to reformulate even the map pool. If you did, though, I could see a way you could make it very good, which is obviously to go the Korean StarCraft approach, where what you do is every season or so, you bring in a new map, you kick out an old map, and then you sort of figure out over time which ones are the good ones and then which ones to experiment with and to replace. That could definitely be a cool way to do it as well.
Yeah. One thing about set maps, though, which is good, I think, for like professional play, we're seeing like the highest level of gameplay possible, because both teams know that map is coming, so they're prepared for that map, rather than like the loser picks a map, you know, the other team might not be as prepared for that map because they could have been expecting the other one.
Yes, so, well, that's one thing you have to, I will have to say, yes, you obviously, as a result, in theory, you can prepare set strategies and specific little in-game moves, even if you want, as we saw in Apex in the past, obviously. The big problem, obviously, is, like, if you do all these other systems, because strategy's involved, you actually might lower the level of play, because you will get series where someone picks a weird map because the other team didn't ban it, and you will get matches where you both play on a map that you don't really practice that, you know, you will get these mad scenarios that, in terms of raw level of play, won't be as good. Then again, though, you can't always go down the let's make for the best like level of play, because as I've always pointed out, the best level of play will always be make me the fucking Vince McMahon commissioner of the league who sets up the matches and decides them and makes like triple threat matches where I introduce like the one person you don't want to fight. Yeah, I'll do all that shit. I've told someone, make that sort of a league, mate. I'll be the commissioner. I'll run it, and I'll bring the personality to the job as well. I'll do the on mic stuff. So okay, let's move on and actually talk about some Overwatch again. Here's a question I have for you. What do you think of the LA Valiant? Because here's the thing. This is a Jekyll and Hyde team. One day,
really
get their shit pushed in by the Gladiators. Next day, apparently maybe we're the best Western team. What is going on with this team?
I mean, they've been doing it the entire season. It's crazy, you know. 2 weeks, they go from 4-0 in Seoul Dynasty. Sure, the meta changes, but like they go from stomping Seoul Dynasty to getting stomped by them in such a short amount of time. It's crazy to think about. I feel like Envy and Fate are like their only consistent performers. They're really good. They usually show up for every match. As for like Soon, he's either average or he's playing at a pretty good level, as well as Unco. And then their DPS situation, they had Silk Thread and Agilities for most of stage 1. They were both very inconsistent. I think that was their like main problem of inconsistency. And that's probably why they're running Kareev now, who was a former DPS player. But I don't know. I thought that would kind of fix it, but apparently not. What do you think, Monty?
I actually don't know what the fuck's going on with them right now. So at this stage with Kareev, for whatever reason, you think, okay, yeah, they do have more consistency at the DPS role. He is able to play basically the combined hero pools of Silk Thread and Agilities, and then he can also throw in, say, the Widowmaker on top of that, which is interesting and good for the Valiant, because previously they couldn't play Widowmaker Tracer together because Soon was the only player they had on both of those heroes who was decent. And especially for this map pool where we're looking at maps like Gibraltar that really reward Widowmaker Tracer on attack, I think that is a good, it's a good time to have Kareev in this lineup. Previously, when they were playing maps with Widowmaker like Junkertown, Kareev would just flex off of the support, and they play one support on Junkertown with Widow for Kareev. So I like that they've done that. Kareev has shown that he can play the Pharah, the Soldier, the Genji. He might not be as good at Genji as Agilities, but he's definitely as good at Soldier as Silk Thread was. He can play the Roadhog like Agilities can. So I think that he's more versatile. I don't know if this is a long-term solution. I think I'd rather see Kareev go back to support and then pick up a different, young, up-and-coming DPS player and try and train him into the lineup, if they can't work with Agilities or Silk Thread as a long-term solution in that capacity. But they have been Jekyll and Hyde. It is worth noting, though, that they have had a soft schedule so far. So, last week, they played the Shock and the Fuel. And in the first week, they got bodied by Seoul and beat Shanghai. And then this week, they got destroyed by the Gladiators, and they beat Houston 4-0. But Houston is actually looking like one of the worst teams in Stage 2. So they I would say that they've beaten the 4 worst teams in Stage 2, except for maybe Boston.
That's fair to say.
I suppose next week they play Florida and Boston. So they've had a super, 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 super soft schedule. And the last week they have to play Philadelphia, New York. And I feel like that's going to give us a lot more information. But they've been sort of beating up on the bottom 5, bottom 6 teams in the stage. And they've been getting bopped by the teams above them in the stage standings.
All right, mykL, isn't that a
and they don't have to play London this stage?
That this is a team where players that were getting a lot of hype, actually, Silk Thread, for example, last stage, it's the DPS players that have gone missing on this team, right? Hence why they've made this weird move to bring over Kareev to play this. Obviously, Soon's going to be a permanent fixture anyway. They look like this looks like a team to me where they're just going to offload those players. It doesn't look like they're working them back in. It's not got a concern. These are supposed to be upcoming talents, right?
Yeah, apparently they're doing a B team thing where they've split their roster now. They're picking up a 12th player to give them some time. But Numlock did come out and say, I don't know, a few weeks ago in Stage 1 that they were not involved at all in the team process, which definitely is shitty as a sub player. You'd imagine at least they're helping with the coaching or analyzing and shit. But something to note is that the LA Valiant have been going through, I guess, coaching problems. They did fire their head coach and bring someone new on recently, and I think during week 1 of Stage 2 they didn't even have a head coach. They had their assistant coach running it. Yeah, so there's definitely some turmoil going on with them, but I think they'll work through that. I don't think that's the main issue. They just need a consistent DPS player, which they found in Kareev. But that's an interesting point Monty brought up with moving him back to support, potentially finding someone you can mold into that role. So I don't know, very interesting. They have had a weak schedule though.
And they're going to continue to have a weak schedule until the last day, basically, when they play against Philly and New York, because they don't play against London. So I think that this team is, in some ways, looking better than they should.
Got a chance to make the playoffs, mate. Could happen.
It could. I think it's unlikely to, considering they've dropped a lot of maps in their losses so far. They haven't played their losses very close.
I think they're behind 7 maps to the 4th place team. So
there are five maps, but yes.
5? Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It is.
Right.
And you have to get up into that 3rd place slot too, and they're currently 7 maps behind the Gladiators.
That's what it was.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so then obviously the team that they beat, who you just said, Houston Outlaws. So you said they look like one of the worst teams in the stage. But after week 1 of the show, they were supposed to be the best Western team. And in fact, I saw some people, listen, some people said these things, they need to be called out, who were literally like, they're better than some Korean teams. It's like, you mean the ones not in Overwatch League? What are you talking about, son? Like, okay, what's happened to the Using Outlaws? How has this happened, Monty?
I think that it's difficult to survive in this meta without an elite tracer player. So they don't have an elite tracer player on this roster. Even Linkser, I don't think, is at the caliber of many of the other tracer players in Overwatch League, as fantastic as a player as he is. You did not need an elite tracer player in stage 1 because the things that Tracer did were somewhat contained by Mercy's existence. And what I mean by that is that when we think about Houston's playstyle, their strength came from, they would often full hold maps or hold you to 1 or 2 points because their defense was so strong they weren't good at control in stage 1. They have leveled up their game a bit in that regard for stage 2. But when we look at how they were playing, when it came to a straight up brawl, they would almost always lose control in stage 1. But what they didn't lose was assault, escort, and hybrid, because they were so good at playing defensively and creating sort of an impenetrable hold on certain parts of maps. And they did this because they were very good at running Junkrat and Widowmaker together. They were good at playing Mercy. And even if teams had good tracer players, the problem is that you could never trade. The attacking team throughout the history of Overwatch was able to trade their tracer for a backline player of the defensive team, whether that is a DPS player or a support. So the tracer can die, but if you trade 1 for 1, the attacking team will have a respawn advantage, so you can get back, and because of tracer also being able to blink back to the point, you can make a trade. Both teams will be at 5v5. You can pull back, and then your tracer will be there faster, and you will have a time to 6v5 the enemy team. Now, when the Mercy meta came along, and you traded 1 for 1, unless you were trading for the Mercy, which was obviously hard to do given Mercy's mobility and her ability to regen her own HP, you couldn't do that because if you killed a DPS or you killed the Zenyatta, they would just be resurrected instantly, and then the defensive team would be at a 6v5 advantage. And even if you had a Mercy and you were attacking, there's no way the Mercy could get into the backline to res the Tracer, right? So it didn't really matter if you didn't have an elite Tracer in that meta, because you could get away with it via strong defensive compositions and having a good Mercy player on your team. Now that Mercy is not as good as she was, having an elite Tracer player matters way more because the ability to open up those kind of holes in the backline on attack is now as valuable as it has been throughout the entire history of Overwatch professional gaming. So I think that they are getting hurt by this. And in week 1, sure, they came out, they beat London, they were looking good, they 4-0'd Boston. But I think that was before a lot of teams really realized how to play this meta properly. And I think we saw in week 2, New York really exploit their weaknesses.
Yeah. I think mentally they kind of lost an edge after that match too. Just reading Reddit maybe, especially for Jake. He's been struggling a lot lately. And overall, it's just been a down performance for every player on the team. I think in that Florida game, honestly, they would have lost that if it wasn't for Muma. He really I think he carried the team through that one. But Cool Matt, Linkser, they were not playing at the level that they were in stage 1. And also something to point out, this new meta without the Mercy, the teams that were prone to making mistakes in stage 1, sure, they could get away with it because there was that Mercy. But now making a mistake, you're really going to get punished, especially against those top teams like New York and Seoul.
And we talked about the defensive advantages of Mercy, but there were attacking advantages to Mercy too. So if we go back and we look at a lot of, say, Seoul's matches from this stage, what Seoul has always been good at, back to the Lunatic High days, was punishing positional errors. So they are very rapid in, if they see somebody out of position, targeting that person and killing them, separating them from the rest of their team and killing them. And so the advantage that attacking teams used to have with Mercy against dive, high mobility compositions that could punish positional errors, is that you would be able to as an attacking team, if somebody got siphoned off and killed, you could res them and continue the attack. You can't do that anymore. So right now, Seoul is succeeding because they are able to quickly pick off somebody. If you're an attacking team and you're approaching an objective and your Zenyatta is lagging a little bit behind, Seoul will just kill your Zen. And when they did that before, the attacking team at the Mercy just be like, okay, whatever, resurrect him. Here we go again. Now the Zenyatta dies and either the rest of the team is sort of like cornered and picked off one by one or killed by all 6 members, or they just have to retreat and wait for the Zenyatta to come back to life or whatever. So even attacking teams' positional mistakes are being punished. So that's the two sides, the attack defense changes that we've seen with Mercy. You just can't erase those mistakes anymore.
It's made the Widow meta like way more intense now too. Like if you lose that Widow duel, like you're kind of screwing your team over big time. You got to win your Widow duels.
Although to be fair, we do see with Widow Mercy still used, and in Widow duels you can always res the Widow, so it's not like quite as different as some of the other ones.
mykL, this is one of those scenarios where, right, I've noticed whenever a player becomes like the target of, like, for example, Reddit criticizing them, because people, especially if you know how Reddit culture works, obviously people hear things that they think is a good opinion and then they repeat it themselves and then they tend to exaggerate it. And obviously with the way upvotes and downvotes work, hyperbole tends to become like the one that wins out here. I've noticed a trend that happens in all esports games I'm aware of, where once one player gets really picked on by the community, everyone else who's like analysts and other players go too far the other way, where they're trying to make it like, oh no, but he is like pretty sort of good and don't blame him too much. Like, okay, yes, obviously this one player is not the blame for the entire problems that Houston has, all their matches, but Jake has been pretty fucking terrible in some of these games, right?
On the Tracer specifically, I feel like overall, the team has been underperforming, but the Tracer's been bad for him.
Yeah, the Tracer I think is the worst offender. I don't know if I would say he's been pretty bad on Tracer, but everything else has been okay. I think the core problem is that they don't have just step back and think about what DPS compositions they can actually run, because it's not good. It's like, okay, so let's think about what else Jake can play, like Pharah, Soldier at a reasonable level. Yeah, so I'd say like Junkrat. Well, you think his Genji's good?
I mean, it's all right. I mean, obviously his Junkrat's on a whole nother level compared to.
I think his Junkrat, his Soldier, and his Pharah are his best heroes. Do you agree?
Okay. I think his Genji's kind of up there. I think it's fine.
All right. So if we think about the kind of compositions they can run, so popular compositions right now are Dive. Can they run Genji Tracer at a level that other top teams can run Genji Tracer?
Yeah, no. I feel like they don't even want to put Linkster on Tracer. Like, he's a lot more valuable on the other heroes.
Right, so if Linkster's playing Genji, then Jake has to play Tracer. That's not going to work for you.
They can't do it.
You can't play long-range hit scan Tracer because Jake can't play Widow, and like Linkster, they don't want to put on Tracer, so what do you can't run like Widow Tracer. Nope. Can you run Soldier Tracer? Well, you could, I guess, if Linkster plays the Tracer and you have Jake on the Soldier, but again, that's not an ideal situation. Unfortunately, Clockwork, who is supposed to be their Tracer specialist, is also not at a level that he can compete with other elite Tracers in this league. Mm-hmm. I mean, this stage should have been the time for Clockwork to start taking over a lot of the DPS duties from Jake for this meta. That's what Houston needed, was they needed a Tracer ace on this roster, and unfortunately Clockwork's not filling those duties, because then you can run Dive with Linkster on the Genji, then you can run Linkster on the Widowmaker. Like, it hurts them so badly not to have this top tier Tracer on this roster.
Yeah, it's not really like Jake's fault either, because like Tracer's literally a hero that you have to play and master it to go up against these players in the league. It's like ridiculous how good some of them are. Jake just swapping to it and trying to get good at it in a couple weeks or even a month, he's still not going to have a chance. Not at all. So
I don't think this is Jake's fault. I think that Jake is a projectile DPS role player on a roster, and it's not his fault that he can't play Tracer. They literally have a dedicated Tracer player who is not good enough right now. So if I'm Houston, like, I'm out there calling Stitch immediately, ringing Stitch up on the phone, begging him to get a visa to come from Korea and help my shit out.
Yep.
Well, this is also, to tie it back into what I said earlier, this is another reason why I'm not really a fan of these like all Western lineups, because this is a team where, I mean, I thought this as soon as I saw the squad formed, and the people they've signed haven't changed any of my thoughts whatsoever, which is you look at the squad and it's like every player on the team pretty much, you're like, yeah, he's a decent player. Yeah, he's not bad. Oh, he's like, yeah, somewhat good. But then you're going down the list, you never really get like, okay, Muma this season's been pretty fucking good. Lynx has had times when he's looked like good in matches. There's not really
Lynxer's been very good
There's
overall.
He's not a superstar at his position, though.
Well, I think he played like one in stage 1. I think he was excellent.
Come on, man. Don't take the term superstar and do that with it. Superstar means you are a star among star players.
Okay.
Like superstar means you're like top 3 player in the world.
Main tank in stage 1.
Okay,
one
there's
of the
one.
best.
There's one.
Yeah, I agree.
And as well as Lynxer.
We were talking about it with Super last time. I had Muma in my top 3 tanks in the league.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too.
Right,
I would
one.
not, to be fair to you, I would not have Lynxer in my top 3 DP.
But here's the problem. This is the problem. When you have one player who's really, really good and the rest are like, yeah, they're good, guess what? You'll probably end up being a middle of the pack team. That's who you probably should be, because think about it. Not only do you not have like best players at even their own traditional heroes, but then God forbid you get a scenario like this where you don't even have the tools to do what you need to do, because these other Korean teams either have the players who can flex onto those heroes, or they're just so good they can make it work anywhere. Because that's one of the things, by the way, that people definitely haven't considered about Overwatch teams is like, because I mean, I guess actually, ironically, Monty, this plays into the fact that I actually praised about Overwatch before, that you don't have to play a lot of heroes necessarily, which is that when you have a meta where you can play these 2 heroes that you really like, people will judge your overall level as a player on those 2 heroes. And what they won't acknowledge is, you might only be really good on those 2 heroes, and if you ever had to play anything else, people might find out you're just an okay player. And
yeah, it's true.
An okay player in a professional game.
And I also think that, like, anyway, you can go, Michael. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that's why they were so good in stage 1, because Jake was one of the best Junkrats in the entire league.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Lynxer was close to that superstar level, and now they're fucked because you can't play Junkrat on all these maps anymore.
Yeah. So is roster move the only option?
Oh, well, I think, and not. I mean, it's not the only option, but.
I mean, let's be real.
Unless you're hoping that there is a meta in the future where Tracer is not going to be important, which in Overwatch's history there has been precisely one meta, which was the stage 1 Mercy meta, where Tracer was not crucial. So unless you're hoping for that to happen again, which I don't think it will, like, you have to have an option to have a great Tracer.
Because, I mean, like, yes, obviously, as you referenced earlier, the overall standings keep rolling no matter whether you make the playoffs of the stage or not. But, like, being real, this stage is already fucking done for the Houston Outlaws. Like, they are not making the playoffs. It's basically over for them. So they have to be looking towards the future now, right? If anything, I'm using the rest of my game. Yeah, you're still trying to win them, but I'm trying to look for, like, which pieces can I keep, which pieces do work. Because, for example, as you referenced earlier with Jake in that scenario, okay, well, in that scenario then, I mean, his coaching staff have to take some of the blame for the fact that he's looking terrible then. Why are they putting him in positions? Like, I always say this, as anyone in a position of responsibility, you should never give someone a job or a task that they cannot fulfill. If you do that, you just throw them under the bus.
Yeah, well, it's because Clockwork just, like, can't hold his own. What they
he
need to
be on
be
the
doing
team,
is
should he?
going
What
and
Foxy
picking
doing on the
somebody
lineup?
up.
Okay. Guess what?
Well,
There's a lot of people.
fair. But we've talked about this previously, and I understand why you would want to give Clockwork a chance, given how good he was at TF2 and given his mechanical ability. Unfortunately, up to this point, he hasn't been more than a sort of unimpressive Tracer.
Yeah.
Unremarkable. It's not like you're sitting there with your jaw on the floor over some of Clockwork's plays. I don't think he's terrible, but he certainly isn't up to the level of Tracer plays that you need to be a top team. Like, they can hold down the fort. It's not like they just beat London. Let's not forget. They did have a good first week. They're 3-3 overall. I think that they can beat, say, they're playing Florida coming up. They're playing San Francisco coming up. Do I think they can beat Gladiators or Seoul, which are 2 of their last 4 matches? But there's a chance that this team can end this season 5-5, right?
Yeah.
Which is not terrible by any means.
Yeah, but they are
very average.
But I don't think the right teams though in their fucking schedule. Come on.
Well, they beat London again.
Yeah.
There's one match.
I think that they won't be a top team again until they can fix their compositional issues. Now, we can talk about how Houston has been strong. They have been very good on Kings Row in particular. They have been actually quite good on that map. And now they've sort of turned into a team that when they can run triple tank with like Junkrat, which they can on Lijiang Control Center, for example, which they can on Kings Row, they've kept things really close. I mean, the Houston New York game last week was actually quite entertaining as a result of the Kings Row map that happened. That was very, very close between the two teams. So Houston still has they figured some things out, I will say, and they've been able to sort of figure out some compositions, unusual compositions on certain maps that work for them, but it's just not going to work on every map. So they're sort of skirting around their issues right now without actually solving them.
So, okay, what about the Philadelphia team then, Michael? Because this is a team where they were looking really promising early on. Now, admittedly, they just had the hardest run you can have. They've had all 3 Korean teams in a row, which is like fair enough. That's a pretty tough schedule to have. What do you make of the Philadelphia squad? I mean, they were looking very promising at one point in time.
Yeah, I really find the EQO and Shadowburn situation very interesting because, I mean, EQO is coming out of nowhere and he's playing very good, right? So it's like, who do you put in? It's kind of up to the management who thinks works better with the team. And they have said that EQO works better with the team. And if they play that play style with like Fraggy, where they can follow up with him and ensure that he's not going to die instantly when he jumps in, they're a very good team. But as soon as like their cohesion and synergy is just off a little bit, Fraggy's going to get abused by like every single team. And that's
what happened with New York. That's what happened when they played New York, is like New York was just waiting for them to make, because they are individually skilled. When we look at Philadelphia, you think about EQO, you think about Shadowburn, you think about Carpe. These are players that on an individual level can make big plays, and you're scared of them, like legitimately scared. So what happens when, like, the way New York played against them was because they still are not at the same coordination level as other top teams. How Philadelphia wins games is you give their DPS players an opportunity to fuck you up. And instead of doing that, New York just changed their entire play style again. We talked about this with New York earlier. What they did was they just sat there and they played super defensively in like a ball, and they just waited for Philadelphia to make an error. They waited for Fraggy to jump in. They kept disengaging Philadelphia whenever they tried to dive and not leaving any opportunities. And eventually, every time, Philadelphia would get out of position, somebody would go in early, and New York would just kill that person and then sit there and wait for them again. It was like a great play style, and London was doing more or less the same thing.
Yeah, we've seen like the counter dive strategy from a few teams. I obviously think like the dive strategy is the superior one, but when you're going up against a team like Philadelphia and they do have players that are jumping the gun way early, like you could just abuse them so easily. And I kind of do feel bad for Fraggy though, because like he does get a lot of shit from the community, but like I don't really know exactly what their issue is, why they aren't like on time a lot. Maybe it's like language barriers, them all being.
I think it's just communication. Yeah, I think it's just communication. We know Fraggy has been, when he was on Giganti, there weren't a lot of these errors. Yes, he does have a weird Winston play style where he is more aggressive, but I think though these are issues that are going to be ironed out. To be fair, Fraggy already looks way better in stage 2 than he did in stage 1. There was a notable improvement in how his team was playing around him. That said, better teams who review footage, again, teams are starting to tailor their strategies, and I think that's showing. What you don't want to do against Philly is get into a dive versus dive fight where it's like pure chaos, because that's when Carpe can absolutely wreck you, or EQO is going to come with like a 4K on his Dragon Blade. You just don't give them those opportunities. If you don't try and like outplay them on an individual level, then they're not a great team. They're an okay team.
One thing I noticed that was quite interesting about them as a team, though, is they generally don't seem to sub a lot. Like, they do use the players week to week, depending on the game. They switch people up, but they tend to just run like the same players. Like, they've had a whole bunch of games where they just played 6 people, basically.
Who, Philly?
Yes.
I feel like when they've ran other people and thrown people in them, it has not gone well for them.
No,
so.
I mean as in, like, they do play the other players. Like, Boombox does play, Shadowburn does play, but they tend to run 6 players for the whole series.
Sorry, you're cutting out.
Yeah, you cut out.
I don't even know what you're saying.
They tend to run 6 players for the entire series of all the maps. They do change the players, but they change them match to match. They don't change them in a game. Whereas every other top team I'm aware of runs the subs, and depending on what the map is,
They may still be experimenting with Shadowburn versus EQO. So EQO played weeks 1 and 3. A Shadowburn played week 2. All the maps in each of those weeks. So they may still be trying to experiment and see which of their styles they want to use. I do know that Dayfly played instead of Boombox in the last match because Boombox was sick. Right. So that might have been.
How much fucking illness is there? Is there something going on in LA? I'm aware. It's like World War Z.
Well, first
off, why is the people ill every 3 weeks?
You may not be aware of this, but this is actually like one of the worst years for flu within recent
do you
memory.
Want to know something, Monty? When I came to LA for that week, when I came to see you and come to the Overwatch, I got a flu that lasted 2.5 weeks after I came home.
I'm sorry. So yes, you do understand.
Well, maybe I was patient 0. Maybe we need to track this back. Maybe I brought that shit with me in an answer. I know.
Some people would say that you're patient 0 for some diseases on the internet.
Maybe I'm like
infecting the esports community.
I'm like that little monkey in Outbreak. Could be, right?
One thing
let's not make monkey metaphors on this show anymore.
Listen, everyone in this call right now is a primate. Argue it if you like. Fact. Anyway, what were you going to say, Michael?
I was going to say about the sickness thing. Something that's interesting. The players, when they come out to get on the stage, they touch all these fans' hands, right? Like they're touching so many people. And I don't know if I was a player, I'd be like, I don't know about that. Like, is that a rule, Monty? Like, do they have to engage or something? Like if you don't, then you look like a dick, right? Like
exactly, Monty. This is a problem I have.
6-year-old kid.
When I'm at events, people think I'm being an asshole when I do this, right? Because if someone asks like to shake your hand or whatever, yeah, you do it, right? But then I always tell whoever I'm walking with, like the other casters, like, no, I have to go to the toilet, wash my fucking hands, don't I? Like, I don't want to go and then forget about that.
The secret is
apple later or something,
Yeah, when I go to events, obviously too, people are like trying to shake my hand. I always like just fist bump them because it's like so much. Yeah. It's so much better. I would recommend the fist bump because then I just explain to people, I'm like, happy to fist bump you, man. I can't shake like 1,000 people's hands or I will get every illness.
See, Monty says that, but I know that's actually a lie. What he actually does is he's like that guy, Adrian Monk from that TV series. He has like a personal assistant at all times. He's like, wipe. And then they pull out like a wipe and he wipes his hand off. Like, the plebeian touched me. Okay, right. I've got that off. And then he puts back on his like very tight leather glove that he wears. So like that bad guy out of... What movie was that? Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess I'll go with. Hey, topical.
That is a great idea. I should have some just leather gloves that I wear.
You put on the glove before you go out there, then you can shake all the hands you want, and then you hand it over to someone.
Hold on, excuse me. You want to shake my hand? Somebody pull on the leather glove.
You could also you could make it work with your fashion style. Have like
I actually could
length or something.
I could make it work with my personal aesthetic. I could also challenge people to duels, which is exciting.
Everyone who remembers the old pictures, I'm sure you've got some arm-length leather gloves or something. Yeah, why not? With studs on them or something.
It's not 20 years ago. I was actually, 22 when a lot of those pictures were taken. I'm not quite that old yet.
No, but you do. I've always said this, Monty, mainly to people when you're not around, but I'm skeptical of the life that you've lived because, like, how come every year if it's like a chapter of a novel, like, and then I lived in this country and I was doing this degree. All right, what did you do next? Then I was in South America. What next? Then I stored away on a steamboat for 3 years and worked my way up to the position of a hand. Like, did all these things happen or did you just read a lot of books? What's going on right now? Like, how old are you again?
I'm sorry I've made interesting decisions and chosen to live an interesting life, Duncan. Well, I apologize for that. It'll make writing my biography just a fascinating journey for somebody someday.
Well, luckily the chapter that's like, and then I was just in LA for 17.
Oh, that's gonna be the boring one for sure.
That's gonna be the boring one, yeah, for sure. Like that one's not gonna be as good, But okay, let's. I'm
gonna have to start a cult or something here to make it interesting. Are you cutting out?
Sometimes silence. As a caster, you should know this.
I can't actually tell because you're cutting out so much whether you're cutting out or not.
Right. What about then the Dallas Fuel? Because this is a team where obviously recruitment. They had some games that were looking up. Ultimately, a lot of problems, though, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it might be the management, but obviously, like, I have nothing to, go off of that. Like, what do you think, Monty? Where do you think problems lie with
I think it's ridiculous to be blaming Kai in this situation because he hasn't had a week. So remember, they get all these players and they're like, here are some tools for you to use, Kai. And Kai's sitting there and he's like, but wait, I can only use like 2/3 of these tools at any one time. Somebody keeps like switching out the tools in his toolbox every week. It's like, oh, great, my tank is suspended. Oh, great, Taimu's sick. Oh, great, Chips Hyan's sick. It's like he's never really had a week of Overwatch League, or Effect is in fucking Korea dealing with the family issue. There were so many of these things that have happened over the 8 weeks that we've seen so far of the Overwatch League. He's never had a week where he can actually use all of the players. That's absurd to hold him to this standard. He's playing with an incomplete deck of cards right now. I'd love to see what he can do if he actually was able to field an entire roster, but we're never going to know because, now XQC is suspended again. They have to wait for this new tank OGE. I've never seen OGE play, by the way, because I wasn't watching his teams in Korea, so I have no idea what kind of player this guy is.
Yeah.
Who even plays what role anymore? They've said Seagull is going to be an off tank. Taimu's going to be a tank. Like, what the fuck is even happening?
Yeah, that's what I mean by the management. I don't mean just specifically Kai. I just mean overall. It seems like they're mismanaging the team and the whole social media stuff too. Like after every single loss, the players, they go on social media, they beat themselves up, they cause all this drama, commotion on drama and stuff. Don't you think don't you think the management should be telling these guys let's just stay off the internet for a little bit?
How about they get him a fucking sports psychologist or counselor or something, because it seems like that's what this team needs. It's not like we don't know they have good players, because historically with many of these players, they have competed at a top level in Korea. So we know they can do it. So there must be some other explanation behind what's going on right now. And it does seem, it's very odd, like you say, that every player, what they do after they lose a game is they all retreat back into their own individual worlds. Effect goes on to his stream with the Korean fans. XQC goes on to his stream with his fans. Taimu goes on Twitter and starts posting. And it seems like they all just fracture apart, go to their own little corners of the internet and start apologizing or shit posting or something like that, getting suspended. It's odd. They don't seem. When we look at a lot of the other teams, they feel like a team. You look at the Houston Outlaws, and you feel like when you're engaging with them on social media, when you're watching them on their streams, that they are a cohesive unit. It seems like Dallas Fuel right now has no team mentality. There isn't a mentality there. They're just like, oh shit, I'm now going to retreat to my own private internet domain and start saying that we played poorly to my own personal fan base. And there isn't any interaction between the players. It's not like it feels, I'm not saying they don't do this because I don't fucking know what they do, but it feels like they just don't do anything together to fix these problems. And it doesn't feel like they even have an attitude about being a team right now. It seems like they have an attitude of, I individually performed poorly and I'm sorry to my fans.
Yeah.
It's odd.
I think that's the only place they find happiness right now is when they go back to their individual fan bases and interact with those people, because all they're doing is losing and they come from backgrounds where they're used to winning, right? So they're just all depressed and it's a fucked situation. And that's where I think the management needs to come in and unite these guys, make them an actual team, stop them from going on Twitter, stop them from going on their streams, blowing up and melting down and just making it more of a shitstorm for the entire team.
I do know that they've been trying to have more team-based interactions. They have a personal trainer that's working with all the players right now. So I think they've been going to the gym together. So they've been trying to foster some more of that team atmosphere, but that's been very recent and it may take some time to develop. But honestly, I think what this team needs, they don't need to play more Overwatch. They don't need to fucking stream more. It's not like they don't have the fundamentals of the game down. What they need to do is after this stage is go on some team retreat in the mountains away from everything and talk about what their team culture is going to be, because I honestly believe that that's the most efficient way to deal with this.
The problem is, though, when you consider to tie back in, the overall rankings of all the stages, where obviously they aren't very high up, and they're a team that had aspirations of being a team that would contend for the title. My issue here is, from seeing a lot of different esports team games over the years, when you have a team like this, where you have good players, but they're individually playing badly, as a team they're playing badly, there's no team spirit, like, unfortunately, there's usually one roster move isn't the fix to that. You usually have to rehaul the whole team. Like, you have to like literally cut half the team out and be like, I'm rebuilding, and it's going to be a totally different route. Not even just because the mad thing is, like, one roster move can change everyone's performance individually, but the problem is, like, whatever big issues are making every aspect fail usually are systemic beyond one player, you know. So sometimes you have to just wipe the whole slate clean and then just start fresh, you know.
I do think there is a systemic problem, like you're saying, because how else do you explain some of the stuff that's going on in this roster? Like, how do you explain, like, where is Coco, the main tank player of this team? Why is Taimu a tank right now? Is Coco, I don't know the answer to this question. Is Coco not motivated to play? Is he slumping for any particular reason? If he's not motivated, why is he not motivated to play? Is it because you don't have a team environment that is motivating him properly? I don't know. It's very weird. Like, people have just been disappearing from the Fuel. Historically good players. Coco has just vanished into thin air, and now Time is the main tank because XQC I think he starts his suspension tomorrow, but they've been using Taimu obviously because they can't use XQC for the next 4 matches, so why not use Taimu right now? Like, Chips was sick, I guess, but you know, he vanished for a while despite historically being one of the top 2 Western support players. It's him and Unko have been there since the beginning of Overwatch. He's been an excellent player, so he was gone for a while.
He was gone for a long time.
Yeah, he was gone for the first 2 weeks of stage 2. Was he sick that whole time? I don't know. It just confused me. Like, I don't. If you asked me to describe the identity of Dallas Fuel, the only thing I can come up with is that they are a bunch of individuals from different countries, right? There's not. It doesn't feel like the same atmosphere as the Houston Outlaws when they were performing well. You could really see that there was a level of camaraderie and a sense of team identity. It feels like you can't. The Dallas Fuel's identity is that they are all interesting individuals, which is their only identity at this point in time, and that's a problem, I think.
I think, like Thorin said, it might come down to just a roster overhaul at this point.
I mean, a lot of those players are good enough to be picked up by other teams, and maybe those players would be revitalized or remotivated by being on different rosters. But
yeah,
I agree. I think it's going to be hard for them to get through this, even though Effect is a wonderful player. They have tons of good players. AKM's a great player. Taimu is a great long-range hit scan player. Effect is a great player. Rascal's a great player.
Well, that's also why it might even benefit everyone involved to have a rehaul, because these players can then revitalize their career playing somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, some of these players should be going to some of the other Overwatch League teams that, like, here's the thing, if you're like the Florida Mayhem, why can't they have a player from this team? He'd probably be better in their team and probably have more of a fucking defined role, be a better player. They can get someone else in that works in this squad. I actually think if you look at it, for all the teams that are trying to recruit Westerners, Dallas Fuel's like hoarding all these good players and then just shit in the bed with them. So distribute those around the rest of the league.
I also think that their morale must be at an all-time low right now because their minds are being consumed with all this drama that's happening, like Taimu getting fined, XQC getting suspended. Like, it's hard to deal with that because how do you motivate yourself when you feel like you're playing with your best with XQC on a tank, but he just keeps getting suspended? It's like, well, fuck it. Like, we don't even have our best tank player, so that's horrible. Like, why would I practice now, right?
Well, you practice because you're a professional and getting paid to play a fucking video game.
Yeah, but unfortunately,
I know what you mean.
People's minds don't actually work like that, right?
No, of course, yeah, logically. But here's the problem as well. This is also a common problem with like lineups that are all massive names and are star names that go to shit. That's one of the problems, because there's not logical people where it's like, well, we can just cut that guy, this guy's shit, whatever. Because logically on paper, you're all in isolation supposed to play well, but you're all playing badly and the team's playing badly. it's like you just feel hopeless because where are you going to go with that? Like it's really hard. You can't really make ruthless decisions with the roster in theory when you have good players, because people will always argue away. Yeah, but maybe he would be good if he had a different player with him and he did this and that, the other. It takes longer to fix those teams, sadly, because of the fact that your brain tells you when you look at the lineup now it should work, or at least not be this bad. At least be like, you know, the 6th best team or something.
Yeah, it's like only getting worse for them too, because every time they lose, they do go on Twitter and they're like, all right, we're going to play better next time. We'll get them next time. And I don't know if they actually believe that. I mean, at this point, they probably don't, because every time that time comes up, they just get shit on even more.
It sounds like they're trying to convince us.
And it's just like, it's thing after thing that keeps happening, right? Imagine how depressing it is to be on this roster. Like I said, with Kai not playing with the full deck. So you're playing in stage 1. Oh shit, effect, our best DPS player has to go back to Korea, so we're not going to have him for these matches. Oh wait, XQC is suspended. Oh wait, XQC is suspended again. It's like, it just keeps fucking happening to them. And so the players have no stability. How do you practice efficiently when you don't even know which players are going to be around from week to week or available to play? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's a whole
like, oh, this player is sick now, so we can't use him, even though we spent the entire week practicing with him. Guess we're going to lose some more matches for no reason. You know, they have been the victim of circumstance quite a bit. And you can make an argument that they knew what they were getting when they signed XQC, which is definitely valid, and that there was a possibility that this could happen once, twice, forever. Who knows what happens in the future? But yeah, I don't think anybody really, the rest of the players deserve that. It's not like they were the ones ultimately making these decisions, but now they're the ones who have to emotionally cope with the fact that they never get to play with consistent rosters or consistent teammates.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's so sick is if you go right now, right, and you look at the overall standings for all of Overwatch League Season 1, if you go and look at them now, right, every lineup on there in the bottom 6 makes perfect sense. It's all the lineups that you would have thought were the weaker lineups or the incomplete lineups or the outright bad lineups. And then there's the one team that doesn't make any sense, is Dallas Fuel, who already is 5-11 and in terrible shape. And they were supposed to be the team that would be battling against the Koreans for top of the fucking league.
And they lost to the Florida Mayhem yesterday.
This has badly. To be that, like it must be so
not
depressing.
Badly. Okay, well, they did get reverse swept.
How they lost was badly. They got reverse swept.
To lose to the Florida Mayhem is to lose badly, son. There's no good way to lose to that team.
I'd rather
unless you snap your leg on the way to the stage. There's no good way to lose to the Florida Mayhem. Come on. Right, okay.
They were so close, and they ripped it away from them.
So we'll continue to tease people with the XQC shit, because I don't actually think it's that related to the Dallas Fuel topic right now, because not necessarily the case that he should have been banned. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's get through the other teams then. Right. The San Francisco Shock, still underwhelming as fuck. I don't care what. Like, I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was the guy who's the commentator for the Korean stream who I saw a comment where he actually claimed that, like, San Francisco Shock is literally, he said, an amazing team and would be, like, good in this upcoming stage right now. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, I don't know. Does that guy owe you money or something? Like, why are you saying shit like that? Like, just complete nonsense. But okay. Michael, San Francisco Shock. Who the fuck is this team?
Like, they have flashes of greatness, right? Like, every time they start off a set, sometimes against good teams, they look really good for like 5 minutes. They give themselves a good advantage, right? Maybe they'll get the map, and then they just fucking absolutely throw it away. They choke or something. They have 4 minutes to cap 1 point to win the map. It'll give them an early advantage. Maybe they can snowball the set or something, but they just can't cap that point for 4 minutes. And
they choke a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I feel like every time that they're in a situation where they have an advantage where it like comes down to the wire and you're like, just fucking win. Like you showed us good shit. They're just like, nah, we're not going to win. We're just going to lay down and die instead. They come so close so many times. It's very frustrating.
Like so many 99/99s on control, so many hybrid and fucking 2CP maps where they have
it's
so
like
much time
they're
to
like
cap something.
They're like defending in overtime, and all they have to do is get one final defense with like an ult advantage, and they win the map, and then they just fall apart.
They'll even go up in numbers too in those fights sometimes. I think it was yesterday against New York on the first round. I think it was Gardens. They were up like 2 people on a 99/99, but they just couldn't do it. Like they weren't focusing or something. Maybe their communication gets too chaotic and everybody just starts doing their own thing. I don't know what the issue is exactly, but overall they just need to like start capitalizing when they give themselves advantages, because they're pretty decent at getting those advantages.
I think it must be their shot calling that's falling apart in these situations. Like, they must just get super panicked when this happens.
Yeah.
I will say Dante has been performing a lot better, so he's been a pleasant surprise.
I think like I do know that like Dak was a shot caller for his team. Baby Bay was also a shot caller for his team. Dante is apparently wants to be very vocal on this team as well. So maybe like they don't have somebody who is, you know, like dictating those shots at the end of the game. Maybe it's getting mixed up and everybody wants to do something else. So that's really what it looks like to me. Like, it looks so like chaotic. They all start doing different things.
I think it also depends on who's on form that day. This last week, we saw two very different versions of the shock, obviously against wildly different opponents when it comes to difficulty. But Sleepy and Dante played extremely well against Dallas Fuel, and both of them dropped down to a different level when they played against New York. Sleepy was getting just wrecked by Jonak. A problem Sleepy's had in the past has been playing too aggressively, and he was just getting, I mean, as dumb as it sounds, like there were a lot of Zenyatta duels going on across the map between Sleepy and Jonak was just winning almost all of them. Just fighting backline to backline and shooting volleys, and Jonak was winning with better peaks and better aim. And Sleepy kept on taking those duels for some reason and lost basically all of them, so that was a big factor. Yeah. And Dante played okay, but Sabielby was on fire.
Oh, yeah.
That against San Francisco Shock. I mean, he was having maps where he was like 29 eliminations and 1 death, like 40 eliminations and 4 deaths. He had a monster day. And San Francisco didn't look good. But by that same token, you look at the match they had against the Dallas Fuel, Sleepy was playing great. Dante on Route 66 was 48 eliminations and 1 death on Sombra and Tracer, which is just nuts. So he's had some really huge individual performances, and he was playing against a good Tracer in effect. So I think that they're still on an individual level lacking a lot of that consistency, which does dictate a lot of their performance. But Dante was not impressive throughout the beginning part of stage 1, and he has consistently improved. So they've got that going for them. Super and Sinatra will be there soon. We'll see if that, like by stage 3, we'll see if that can power them up a little bit. I think they should probably make some additional signings as well.
Apparently they have.
Rumors?
Secretly.
Yeah.
What are the rumors?
And Choi Boyhoiben or whatever from X6.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's odd that they would get another flex tank like Choi, because Choi Hyobin, I think is his name, because Nevix has been playing really well. He's been one of the best players on that team. Architect is obviously amazing because right now, in stage 2, San Francisco has basically just been playing Tracer or Sombra with a long-range hit scan. So it's either been Tracer/Sombra with McCree, Widowmaker, or Soldier. That's basically all of the comps they've been using. So they don't...
So Architect is going to this team?
Yes. Allegedly.
Yeah, apparently. Most of those rumors have been true so far, so I would assume that he'll probably be joining them.
So why wasn't... Like why with all the other teams that would want him are better than this team? How does this work? What is the logic going? Do you think they're just throwing mad money at him?
Well, I don't know. I think Architect Rascal to the Fuel, I think, fills the same needs that Architect would have. I think teams that really needed better projectile players were San Francisco, Valiant, probably. So he could have gone to Valiant. That would have made sense.
Florida
would have made sense. Well, I don't know. Like, is Tavik the problem?
Not the past 2 matches.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if I would think that Florida would necessarily be the best place for him. I think San Francisco and Valiant probably make the most sense for Architect to go to.
Especially since you think of Valiant and you assume they have loads of money in the fucking bank. They can sign anyone they want. So who knows what they're waiting for?
Yeah, I don't know. But those would be the 2 teams that I think would probably be the highest priority to sign Architect as a player. Now that Dallas would have been before they got Rascal. Yeah. But Rascal's already here. Rascal already has a visa, so I guess filling that more immediate need. And I think it makes more sense for San Francisco because they have an emphasis on developing younger players as a team. So if he goes there, that would be cool. I guess maybe just as for comfort reasons, they get Choi, but Nevix has been playing pretty well on the off tank. Maybe you get Choi and you move Nevix to support. That's an idea.
Yeah. Dak's been underperforming a decent amount, especially in Stage 1. He was probably the worst Mercy in the league, besides like looking at Shanghai, but he was not good. Yeah. I think Sleepy's fine when he's on, but like that's just like a team thing.
Sleepy's also a rookie, so I'm willing to give him a pass for a while. For a rookie, he's actually been pretty good. I mean, he's not Jonak, but he's been pretty good. I think that maybe, and Nevix has played support professionally previously, maybe you just move Nevix to support, you move Dak into a more analyst or coaching role, and you use Choi and Architect. And then that could actually make San Francisco pretty scary, as long as Nevix picked up the support role again. But Nevix is also just like a practice animal. He is constantly playing the game.
Also, I know Super coming in.
Yes, that's true. Super coming in.
I think he was the best tank in North America that I ever played against. So I think he's got like
what do you think made him so good?
He's like just, I guess during the time it was more like it was a really heavy dive meta, right? He made so much space for the LG Evil squad, and like you just couldn't deal with him. You really like he would never die for some reason, and it didn't feel like it was because of the supports or like people were supporting him. He just always found a way to get in there, make sure like he wasn't focused down, and then get out. And then that created space for like Jake to pop off on the Soldier, Train on Tracer. So I don't know. I think he's just really good at managing his timings and windows.
Right, let's talk about, since you referenced them earlier, the Florida Mayhem then, because this is a team where they still obviously don't win many games, but as you referenced, Tavik had basically a pretty ridiculous week, just popping off in all his games. As the Florida Mayhem, now that they've got the roster moves, is this actually like, bearing in mind, there are a limited amount of teams in the league. It doesn't matter if you get better, you have to get better and win games. Are they actually headed upwards, or are they just a better bad team?
I think they're headed upwards. Logix has consistently been improving. He's still not at the levels we saw from him online, but his LAN improvement has been noticeable. They've been playing better as a team overall. The meta is definitely better for them without the Mercy, because they like San Francisco, had some of the worst Mercy players in the league. So that I think is helpful. And I think that they have been stepping up overall. And I think even if Logix doesn't continue to improve, the fact that they are getting Saya player at least gives them an option to play somebody besides Logix if he's not having a good week. I think that getting another main tank at least provides them an option to move away from Swoosh if they have to, because I think Swoosh has been, I think the supports have been honestly probably the biggest problem for the Mayhem, but it's probably Swoosh after the supports. I do wonder a little bit if Zappis is going to start playing a support role.
Does Saya player get here before the stage ends?
I don't know. I don't
think so. They announced that Zappies and their assistant coach would be here by stage 2.
They are. They're already here. They're already
so
here.
I think they would have announced that Saya player would have been here.
Right.
Yeah, and look, honestly, another big problem for the Mayhem is that they had, okay, you look at a team like Seoul. Seoul has 4 coaches. 4.
Yep.
And they have a team manager. So immense. There a lot of these teams have way more infrastructure. Mayhem had Mineral, just one guy. So Ryder is here now. I saw him yesterday, said hi to him. Former professional Korean player who moved into coaching, was coaching Meta Athena, which Saya player and Awesome Guy are coming from. So he knows those players very well. He already has an established rapport with them. They know how he wants to play the game. So I think that's encouraging. But they're finally building out their subs. They're finally building out their support staff. And I think that was something that really held them back. You know, there's only so much research and preparation one coach can do in the game. And when you're trying to compete with one person against 4 coaches on, say, Seoul, you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah. It was a huge problem that they only had one coach. Also, and they had a player on the roster like previously too.
Yes, he was a player on the roster, so yeah, he may not have the authority. I don't know for sure. That's just sometimes a problem that crops up. They didn't they have a manager on that team, a house manager, actually one of the ones who used to work for Renegades, interestingly. But they have a house manager, but their house is really far away from the practice facility. And you saw like Tavik, who and Swoosh were the only ones with valid driver's licenses in the States. So they have to drive like the team van, like 45 minutes each way to the practice facility. Just ridiculous. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
They had no infrastructure. Like, they were literally driving themselves as a team over to the arena, and it was taking like 45 minutes each way. And they also practice in the arena. They don't practice at their home. So they're doing that like 6 days a week.
That's
they had a lot on their minds. They had a lot on their minds that was not the game.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Obviously, we don't need to talk about the Shanghai Dragons because they haven't got their new players yet, and they still lose every game pretty much.
And Dia's like in China now for some family emergency, so he like one of their best players isn't even there. Just horrible circumstances for them.
Unlucky. So the last team to talk about is the Boston Uprising. Now, this is a team where I just feel like, you know what, maybe there was just a lag while the universe like error corrected. They were like, oh, they're actually pretty good. They win all these games. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on? Like some sort of problem in Sector 7C. Oh, there's been a mistake here in the Matrix, actually. That team's not supposed to be good. Fix that, please. Thank you. Okay, it's fixed now. Right, they can go back to sucking and press conferences and potential internal turmoil and firing people.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with... A Slasher has been tweeting.
Well, then you're
like
entirely free to speculate. So
mad about all of that.
By the way, Monty, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Just going to go ahead and say this for everyone. Tweeting is not journalism. Like, journalism is when you actually find out, you hear something, you go and corroborate it, you check with multiple people, and then you put out a report in a professional manner with journalistic ethics. Hearing things off people who are just one person who's a player who you're friends with on a Discord, and hearing something secondhand from a player that's not involved, and then tweeting it is not journalism. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Like, anyone can do that. Anyone in the scene can go ahead and do that. Most people don't do it because it's pretty unprofessional, but, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there.
Okay. Well,
the reason I say it, Monty, is I wanted to clear up because there might be a misconception that Slash is a journalist because he used to work as a journalist 3 years ago, but that's not the case anymore.
Doesn't he work with ESPN?
Definitely does not work with ESPN, I'm afraid. That was a few years ago.
He has written some ESPN articles recently.
He might have contributed to some news. Okay, maybe he's been brought back in some capacity then.
But he's not an employee. He's not a full-time employee.
Okay.
But he has actually been a contributor to ESPN recently. And a lot of that was there was an article that he wrote about a lot of the contenders rosters that turned out to be basically, obviously it was like a huge article listing all the contenders players. I think maybe some of them were incorrect, but it was largely accurate.
Okay.
So there have been claims that there's like a lot of drama within the Boston team right now. I don't know anything about that. The Boston organization.
Logical,
yeah. Well, is it logical? I don't know. They were doing really well in stage one. It seemed like they were performing at a level that exceeded people's expectations. So
the reason I think it's logical is because I actually thought from day one this is a lineup of management people who were delusional. Like, they from day one had this mad chip on their shoulder. Like, why is everyone saying this roster won't be amazing? It's like, first of all, these are like unknown or unproven players or just outright bad players on the context of the Overwatch League. So then when you compete and you do really well, it's like, well, okay, you did really well. Cool. Let's see if this can continue. When it then goes downhill, it's inexplicable why we're doing badly. Is it? Is it? No, wait a second. He did a facial expression that implied he disagreed with the statement that some of these players were bad, some were unproven, and some were just like new or whatever. Okay, come on then.
Well, I disagreed with the part where you said like seemed like you were emphasizing on like a decent amount of them were bad. I think a lot of them were kind of the star players of the teams that they were on. Being like Gamsu, Striker, Dream Casper.
Okay.
I mean, I watch Apex. Everybody watches Apex. We've seen Rock Orcas play.
Okay, so you've picked one player.
We've seen Tempo play in North America. We've seen Gamsu play on Convox.
Right, wait a second.
We've seen Neko play on NX Foxes or NC Foxes, whatever the hell their name was.
Right, wait a second.
We've seen them play.
No, okay, don't wait a second.
Well, I've seen them play. I don't know about you.
Okay. I'll just wait till you finish. Are you finished now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, right. So 2 of the players you listed were Korean players, yes? Am I ever going to get an answer to that? 2 of the players you listed were Korean players.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're cutting out. Sorry.
Yeah.
2 of the players you listed were Korean players, yes?
Yeah.
And they were the best players,
three of them were. Three of them.
or among
Three
the
of them
best,
were.
or among the best players on some of the worst teams in Apex.
NC Foxes was good. They got fourth.
They were okay. That was like one of the most fraudulent fourths probably ever in fucking Apex. Come on.
Sure,
Like, remember,
that's what you
you have
think.
to-
I mean, it was a season where Lunatic High didn't even make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know what? This is
Seems
what.
like
Okay,
a
do you want
competitive
to get
season.
into this? This is the reason why you don't ever cite teams making the second stage or making top 4 in Apex if they don't win or go to the final. Here's why: because the format of that league was utterly fucked and meant that it was not always even distribution in each of the groups and then in the second stage. It wasn't a tournament where it's like I finished 4th, so I am better than the teams that finished 5th to 8th. Bullshit. Everyone saw the season where Rogue had that group that was like the 2 teams that made the final. Like it wasn't a uniform distribution like that. So putting that aside, okay, you've picked 2 players out of the entire roster who might be good on the grounds they were pretty good on not great teams. Okay, we've got those out the way. Put those to one side now. Funnily enough, Korean. Now that we've gone past them, your next one that you went to immediately was a player from Tempo Storm. Like, have I missed something, mate? Was Tempo Storm some really good team like what land placings did they have? How did they do in contenders?
I never
Am
said they
missing
were a
something?
really good team.
Am I missing something?
I'm a player who competed against that team a ton in scrims, tournaments,
Yeah.
tier tournaments, stuff like that. So personally, I knew that Dreamcaster was a decent player, someone that could be good in the Overwatch league.
Okay. So how am I supposed to know that?
I don't
Am I
know.
supposed to be sat on your shoulder watching?
That's why I made my face, and I was like, "Oh, I disagree."
Right, so, okay, can we keep going? Is there any more players that you want to list that were, like, actually known to be really good?
Kalios proved he was pretty good. He competed in China, right? Or which team was
I don't
Kalios
know,
on?
mate.
I don't remember
I can look
exactly.
it up
which
if you want.
Kalios was
Wait,
on. He had a lot of hype going into the Overwatch League, though. He was one of the players on that roster that people would say, "Oh, well, maybe Kalios will be good."
Another Korean player, though, but okay, fair enough.
Callius was on WNV Korea, and he was also on Runaway and the Africa Freaks.
Okay. Freak of freaks. Yeah, I mean, overall, like, they did have some good experience from the players. They just weren't really that well known. I made a video on them before the preseason saying that they would be a good team.
Okay, then why are they terrible?
They aren't terrible. They almost
Right,
made the stage one.
You know
final.
what? Let's
Like,
just remove.
what do you mean?
Nah, you know
Why-
what?
Stop it.
You know, man, let's just
Okay.
remove all terms, I guess, at this point in time. So, at any point in time, let's all move the goalposts. So, if a team now is bad, just say how they did in stage 1. If a team was bad in stage 1 but's good now, well, now they're good. What are you talking about? They're bad. Let's never at any point in time actually talk about right
So,
now, which
let's
is the
talk
only
about-
context
let's talk
of this
about
show.
right
Which is
now.
the only context of this show. It's not a
Right
historical
now.
recap of the fucking Boston Uprising. Like, this is the thing. Because you don't want to say that they're a bad team, you just skipped back a fucking stage. I don't give a fuck about stage 1, mate. This is stage 2. And you're putting me in stage 3 of something that I'm not allowed to joke about in the Overwatch League anymore with your fucking analysis. So, in stage 2, why is Boston Uprising not good? Because you just listed off all these great players that should be really good. What do you think's wrong?
Right now, they don't have Gamsu.
That's
Okay,
true. They
fair enough.
actually do not have their best player right now.
So does the tank leaving just make the rest of them collapse, do you think?
Well, they don't have a main tank to fill the shoes. They're putting one of their off tanks on that role. And as for like the meta shift, I don't know, maybe they're not adapting to it well, but I feel like they should because their dive and their teamwork was really good in stage 1. They were one of the best dive teams. Their coordination was insane. We'd see them like on Anubis, the way they attacked point B. It was just like incredible. The timing, everything was perfect. And now it just seems like they're not able to do that. And of course, they don't have that main tank. Maybe that's the issue. Dreamcasper has been a little underperforming, but I feel like Striker's still been playing out of his mind. He's like one of the most underrated tracers in my opinion. Nako's been fine. I honestly don't know what the problem is. Maybe it is the turmoil. But the main thing I look at is just they don't have their main tank right now.
They've also been, they've been playing mistakes more, so they've been they were pretty, like, besides Note and Kalios swapping out, they were pretty consistent in running one roster throughout stage 1, and now we're seeing a lot more mistakes. And yes, some of these have been like against the Shanghai Dragons, where they wanted potentially to give mistakes more playtime, but it almost, when you see tweets like Slasher's where he says things like certain players are on the trading block, it does make it seem like they are trying to figure out other options for this team because they may not be thrilled with how things are going if they're going to be playing more mistakes instead of Striker, or at least seeing how he's going to do in these professional matches if Striker is one of the players that they supposedly want to get rid of. I don't really understand why Gamsu's gone right now. I think he's like in another country at the moment.
He's in Korea. They said he was sick.
Yeah, they said he was sick, and then he's in Korea. So I hope it's not super serious. Obviously, through the Overwatch League, he has health insurance in the States. So I don't know why that would necessitate him returning to Korea.
They said he was sick, and then they felt like he earned a break since they've been working very hard and they didn't like take Christmas off. So they decided to just give him 2 weeks off.
Okay, yeah, let's just fucking believe that.
That's like literally what Huck said in his post.
Okay, sure, nothing's weird about that. So let me get this straight. So Boston's whole philosophy was, we are going to take coachable players and we are going to work harder, and our players are going to sign up for this team culture that is extremely discipline-oriented, teamwork-oriented, coach feedback-oriented. And we knew before coming into the season, teams were saying, Boston is scrimming like an extra block every day. They're scrimming more than anybody else. They've been working really hard. Their improvement has been noticeable. So you're telling me that a team with this team culture says, oh, no, you know what? Fuck it. We worked for all of this stuff, for all this improvement. Well, it was just fun before the league started. So in the actual league, you're going to pull your best player and send him on a fucking vacation to Korea for 2 weeks? That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. Like, that's total bullshit.
I'm finding the article right now. I'm just exact wording on this.
There's no way that's a real opinion, because it's counter to everything they have said that they work for.
One thing I find confusing about this team is like, okay, listen, if someone is literally ill, I realize this has obviously happened a lot in the Overwatch League, but in theory, that is very, very unlikely that a pro player will be ill and not be able to play. So you don't have to have backups just for that. But if you notice, almost every other team in the Overwatch League has 2 tank players. Meanwhile, Boston has just Gamsu, and then they have 4 support players. 4. Why do you need 4 support players?
Maybe they didn't. Well, I think they did that because they knew Gamsu was going to be good coming in, but they may not have known which of their support players was going to be the most coachable or trainable, because it's not like they got a star support player, right? So I think they did that because they were less confident. Yeah, so Michael's putting this in our chat right now. Flew to Korea, scheduled to fly back tomorrow, I guess the 12th of March. But so the logic, so at this point, you either have to say, it was a mistake for us to practice over Christmas. We burned our players out. We will not be doing that in the future because it is now affecting our performance. Or you can't make this statement, which is that, oh yeah, we did all this practicing so we could play some fucking Overwatch in the Overwatch League. But now, now that the actual matches are here, we're going to take some breaks.
Yeah.
Whatever. Cool. What the fuck were you practicing for? You were practicing for matches.
It kind of makes him like denying all the rumors to be untrue, like not believable.
It looks super suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't mention anything about the inner turmoil. He did say that, we're not trading Striker, we're not trading Gamsu, we're not trading Nako. But he didn't say anything about turmoil.
I mean, it'd be crazy to trade Striker and Gamsu. That is.
Oh yeah, it'd be ridiculous.
Gamsu is a top 5 tank in the league. There are other teams that would take him instantly.
Yeah, I think Striker's close to a top 5 tracer too.
It's all right. Just send Striker. Just send Striker over to the Houston Outlaws. Send Gamsu over to, I don't know, the Florida Mayhem, Dallas Fuel.
Trade him for XQC for that all Western roster that they apparently need.
Yeah.
Become the Boston downgrading.
Well, it sounds like they're a Boston downsizing, really, if they're going to start firing players.
Yeah. Very interesting, these rumors.
And also, the other reason why I could believe there's inner turmoil is, remember, part of the... if you remember the context in which everyone flamed Boston when they heard what basically was the squad that they ended up making, the rumoured squad, the lineup they were putting together, was that everyone was like, oh, this is the... If you remember, this is the team where everyone in the Overwatch... scene was making like veiled tweets about like, oh, the nepotism and the recruiting system's so corrupt in the Overwatch League. They were all talking about this team because people's implication was that like Huck and other people had picked players that they wanted and for their reasons, but not necessarily players that other people thought were good enough. So if you do that, the upside of that is if it works, I mean, obviously it makes sense a Boston team would do this. You will be hailed as the fucking legendary person who put together the squad that people didn't think would be good enough, and that will all work for you. But if it goes badly, you will also now be remembered as the person who put together that team that went and had the results.
This is what's so weird. It was working. It was clearly working. They nearly made the stage 1 playoffs, right? There was an opportunity for them to do that. They were scrambling up the standings. So why now are there all these problems? Like, if there is inner turmoil in the team, I don't even know how that could come about, because the players signed up to be part of a Boston system that was clearly, like, the culture of that team was clearly set from the day one when they signed those contracts of work harder, be disciplined, exist in a black box with no PR, right?
Yeah.
Where you just don't say anything, which is famously what the Crafts do with the New England Patriots, right? Bill Belichick says nothing ever about anything. And they just sort of keep everything contained and ignore the outside world. Well, it seemed to me that that's what Boston was trying to do with this team as well. And they were successful. They were beating everybody's expectations. So why would what the hell happened where there is if there is an internal collapse, what is happening within this team? Because you would think, because they were exceeding everybody's expectations, they were doing better and better and better, that there wouldn't be a morale issue.
Yeah, I have no idea. Apparently, it's the Korean mindset and I guess the Western mindset. That's what it sounded like in the reports that Slasher made.
Well, that also
disagreed with Gamsu, Nako, and the coach, which is Krusty, who coached the NC Foxes.
Well, that is also something I will say from other games that have had mixed rosters, is first of all, Koreans are really happy to join a Western team when they just see all the upside. I'm getting money, I'm going to become more famous, maybe it's even a good team. But as soon as there's problems, that's when, if other players either don't practice as hard or just don't play the game the right way, they're going to have massive problems there. And then secondly, if you've got a little clique of them as well, they always form a clique as well. So if you have coaching staff that's related to players as well, already, if there's going to be any division, that's how your locker room's going to divide up. It's just going to be the way it goes, sadly. So the problem in that scenario is, I know Huck obviously has a lot of experience working with Koreans from StarCraft when he was on teams with Koreans, lived with Koreans, but that's not as simple fire to put out as people might think in that sense, because you're not necessarily just dealing with one player.
Yeah.
And as we've seen perhaps over in the Valiant team, this is why suddenly a player is now a DPS player, because he happens to have a relationship with the coach that's brought in who is Korean, and guess what? Suddenly the whole team complexion can change. So,
and literally was his coach when he played DPS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even just a random Korean. It's his old coach from Mighty AOD, where he played DPS.
I'll tie it back into what you said, Michael. So the players you listed off that you thought were good and already were established were all the Koreans. So if I'm the Koreans and things start to go really badly, maybe we do band together and we're like, listen, we're good.
Yeah.
Let's play differently. Let's build the team out differently. We want this player to play instead, or this role to happen. I could see that. That's not even unreasonable necessarily,
Dreamcasper was performing super well by the end of Stage 1, though.
He was one of the best Western players in the entire league at Stage 1.
Yeah, he was really good.
But yeah, no, that makes complete sense why they would band together,
Okay, so as a final segment, I thought it was best to leave it to the end so we actually discuss all the game, etc., which I noticed a lot of the people who came for this drama then quickly did not stick around to actually talk about the fucking games or watch the Overwatch League, which I have to say is one area that I find super disingenuous. I don't want to You know what? I actually don't care about the opinion of someone on how many women they think should be in the Overwatch League if they don't watch the Overwatch League. That person's opinion has no value to me. That would be like me, someone who lives in England and doesn't watch, pick any sport that I don't watch, lacrosse, being like, why aren't there more Native American Indians? Who gives a fuck? You don't follow the sport. What relevance would your opinion be? So anyway, what happened was the Overwatch League published a piece of news where they explained disciplinary action against 4 different people. There was Ty Moo for comments he said on his stream. There was Ty Wrong for that meme where he basically like memed about dropping a nuke or something, which was
in poor taste. That was
an obvious misunderstanding though. And then there was Silk Thread, who had been account sharing, so pretty understandable. And then the one that attracted all the attention, obviously, was XQC, who we obviously have referenced on the show already, the tank of Dallas Fuel, who, admittedly, not just for this incident with his history in the past already, where he was suspended for vaguely similar behaviour, got suspended for 4 matches, fined $4,000, and well, that's it. But then they explained the reasoning why, and the reasoning why basically was it was actually more than people just honed in on. So yes, part of it was he used the TriHard emote and wrote TriHard 7 in the actual official Overwatch Twitch stream while the game was going on, when Malik Forte, the host, was on. And obviously a lot of other people also do the TriHard emote. So then really the whole issue became about him using the TriHard emote there. But it is worth pointing out that in their explanation...
there were other things.
Yes, but here's a flaw, Monty. When someone has done a crime, you don't just say, and he also did other crimes. You mention what the crimes are. That is a mistake they made in this post, because they just mentioned that he also used disparaging language. The problem with that is you don't know what they're referring to. So presumably they also mean where on his stream he said that the casters were cancer or something.
No, he tweeted that.
He tweeted it, right. But the implication is it's all these things tied together, and the context of his past crimes, if you want to call it that, infraction, whatever, that then has led to this scenario. So the big issue here is there's two real issues. One is use of emotes by everyone, including XQC, in esports streams, and then the other one is obviously XQC specifically using this emote in this instance added to all of his other infractions and what that means. So let's do the second one first, because the second one's just about XQC. So in the context of this show, we've already had to discuss and have to discuss on many past episodes that it's actually hard to fully criticize Dallas Fuel because they've almost never had this fucking player in their lineup, and he is supposed to be one of the better Western players.
Yeah. So here's what I want to say about XQC. Like, I really enjoy watching him play, and I would like him to be a part of the Overwatch League personally, because I think he is additive in terms of his gameplay. I think that when he's at his best as a streamer, he is creative and funny and has a fan base that really cares about him, and he is dedicated to practicing the game, and he's very dedicated to streaming. I think that he needs to be more creative himself when it comes to how he presents himself and his opinions, because when he is entertaining and he is coming up with his own ideas and his own phrasing and the whole like rolled and smoke my doggies like stuff is actually funny. When he is mimicking Twitch chat, and this is what I told him on Twitter after he said and deleted the whole casting his cancer tweet, I believe I said, if you could get away with a lot more if you were more original and witty in your phrasing. So when he just responds with like some shitty Twitch meme or without context, if he had said something about the casting that it was like as lame as Riptire the Ultimate or something that we know he doesn't like or something, I think it wouldn't have been a big deal. Look, first off, let's put it clearly. I was not offended by him saying the casting was cancer. First off, it wasn't even about me in the first place. I wasn't even casting that game. He had just finished a VOD review of it. I just think it's just in poor taste. It's just like, come on, man. Like, I think the problem with XQC is that he doesn't understand that he's fundamentally part of a larger ecosystem, and that he, in spite of always saying that other people are playing the victim card, it's actually him playing the victim card most of the time, saying, oh, I was victimized by this system, I was victimized by this process, except the casters would always listen to XQC. So the thing is we don't go around saying, oh yeah, we don't like this player, we're going to present them poorly. Our job is to present players accurately, and if XQC had issues with the casting, he would always be welcome to come to us and give us constructive criticism. We won't ignore him. We will listen to what he has to say. For all I know, he has valuable insights into this process, and would like to see certain things differently or can point things out to us as casters that we can hone in on and make it better, not only in terms of representing him and what he's doing and his skill at the game, which we would like to highlight inherently. That's our job. But to understand where he's coming from and try and just shape things up for the league in general. And even that conversation that I had with him on Twitter regarding this, which a bunch of idiots said I should be punished for, which I don't really understand because I didn't say anything terrible besides...
By the way, that is one thing to quickly say as well. It obviously also doesn't help things. Like, this isn't his fault, but his fan base has within it a certain kind of person that just does say some dumb shit themselves. So the backlash, like, here's one thing that doesn't help, right? If you're trying to defend someone against comments like racism or like in poor taste, it doesn't help for the person who wants them to be defended to then also be like, go totally too far the other way and then be so outrageous themselves that you're like, fucking hell.
Well, so here's the problem. So the XQC fan base, like you're saying, they don't like the fact that what they want, it seems, is for Felix XQC to be able to represent his opinions and show his personality, right? Sure. Ostensibly, that's what they want, is for him to be able to freely say what he wants without this kind of punishment. But their reaction to him getting punished is to come back on every other person and say, no, if he's punished for that, you should be punished for this, which is directly contrarian to what they wanted in the first place.
Yes. It's got to be one or the other. Either everyone's getting punished or no one is. But
it seems like, but if you want players to have more freedom in what they say without getting punished for it, the improper reaction is to come back on everybody else and say, well, if he was punished, then you should be punished. It's like, you don't want that. You don't want to exist in this league where everybody is punished.
Yeah.
You want the banter.
They're too fucking stupid to know that.
It's ridiculous, though. Right? Why would you simultaneously support XQC's free speech, but when he's punished for it, free speech, I think, we can talk about that in a minute. Yeah, it's just like about revenge, but your revenge makes for something you don't even want. So stop it.
I do think, I do kind of think it is a little of XQC's fault, like how his fan base reacts. Because every time he is punished, or every time he says or does something stupid,
no, he just goes and justifies it.
Yeah, he turns his stream on and he just flips out and starts going ham on everybody.
Yep,
and gets his whole entire fan base riled up. So they get fired up and they're like, all right, let's go, fucking Jake, fuck you, Monty.
Yeah,
find them,
exactly, exactly.
So it kind of is XQC's fault.
I think that's the fundamental problem with XQC, and what is so frustrating about him is that he does this. He intentionally whips his fans into a frenzy to go, dispense justice allegedly to other people, even though he can be contrite and apologetic when it comes to actions he's taken. But there's always this justification. There's always like, the way he handles this situation is so poor, which we'll talk about, I think, in a minute. But so anyway, about my conversation with XQC. So basically, that conversation ended with me saying like, okay, let's have lunch next week. So you know what I did? I set up lunch with XQC next week, and he stood me up, because I was going to go talk to him about how I think he could improve his standing within the league, even though it's not my decision as to whether he gets punished or not. I want him to be able to be vocal and banter with people in an appropriate way. And I was going to talk to him about how he could do that. And I was also going to get feedback about casting so that we could improve. So what happened was I scheduled a lunch for him with him this past week. He did not show up to our lunch, and then has never messaged me about it, despite confirming a date and time at which he would be there. So my opinion is that he doesn't actually he doesn't care about anybody else besides XQC. He's not interested at a very deep level, a fundamental level, in participating or being part of the broader whole of the Overwatch League. And he is painting himself as a victim when in fact it is his own actions, or inactions rather, in some cases, that are getting him into trouble.
See, I've seen this happen before, Monty, because on a lesser scale, this happened literally recently to a person involving myself, where there was a guy in Counter-Strike, a Brazilian player, who was only in the scene at the top level for about 9 months. He wasn't even around for years. And this guy had similar issues to QXC, where he had a bunch of things happen, and all of them in isolation We're never that terrible, like, turned up late for a match, like said something stupid to someone, said a joke that was inappropriate. In isolation, all of them, if it was another person, would be like, okay, you fucked up, but just say you're sorry, like take the punishment, move on. But what this guy never realized, and this is why I'm tying it in, is he never accepted two things. One, the notion of cause and effect. He never understood how his actions caused the response. He always thought that whatever he did was fine, and then he was always being victimized by the response. Like, it was never like, it wasn't even like it was that, the response was disproportionate. It was like he should never be punished. He should never get any of that. And if it is, you're singling him out. Then the other factor was the guy also never acknowledged that these things stack. When you do these things again and again and again, you create a reputation. So that here's the thing, in both of these instances, like I actually don't think this is as bad as some of the past things. Like when I saw the explanation for why XQC did the TriHard 7, it isn't actually as terrible as people think. But
yes,
you've built up. My analogy I gave was, if you think of like social credit of like, this is how much benefit of the doubt people will give you. You have an overdraft. You've emptied the whole account of social credit, and now no one's willing to give you the benefit of the doubt on anything. So if you do anything, they're going to go ham. So here's the sad thing, if you're XQC. Actually, now, you at some degree might be in some way victimized, because people are just going to see anything you do and assume the worst. But I've seen this happen in sports, like players who get a lot of technical fouls. Guess what? That guy can't talk to the refs at all. Because if he now talks to the ref, that ref's ready to be like, if this guy fucks with me, I'm going to show him from like the first moment that I'm serious. I'm going to give him the tech. I'm going to tell his coach, get him out of here. Like, unfortunately, you've built that rep up for yourself. So I agree. Like, now you might get unfairly treated as a result of it, or people might just assume the worst. But you're going to have to like even that out. You're going to have to do a lot of things that then make people now give you the benefit of the doubt again, because it's not. You have to understand why they're doing it, and it's reasonable in some degree.
And he continues to burn all the bridges of people who have goodwill for him. Again, I said I want him to be successful in the Overwatch League. And when the first incident happened, I went on Twitter and I didn't justify his behavior, but I did try to prevent a witch hunt against him, which I could see was brewing. And we had a long conversation about why what he said was inappropriate and why he deserved to get punished on a previous episode of OverSight here. And I do agree that he should have been punished, and I do agree that it was inappropriate. But I also think that I was afraid that there might be a giant backlash against him. So I went out of my way in order to try and, I suppose, mediate that situation. And then coming into this, like I said, I made time out of my schedule, which is quite busy, to attempt to have a face-to-face meeting with him and listen to him about why he thought maybe the casting wasn't as good or wasn't what he would like it to be, because I was legitimately curious and seeking to represent him better. But this guy just goes out on the internet and he slings all this shit at the wall, and then he doesn't follow up with anything. I think that's my biggest problem with his behavior. He stirs up all this drama, but nothing ever fucking changes. He keeps doing the same things over and over and over again. And to go back to the TriHard issue, it does seem like he talked to Malik on a personal level after that happened. Yes, historically, he has used the TriHard 7 as like sort of a salute or a welcome to people. And his explanation is that he went into the chat, didn't know that it was Malik on there. Stretches credulity, honestly, but if it has historically been something he has done in a variety of contexts, that doesn't make it okay, because you can do the same thing 100 times, but if you do this, the context matters. If you do that thing that you do all the time in the wrong context, It's going to be perceived very negatively or taken in a very different manner. And in this case, I do think that he should not be doing that in Twitch chat when Malik is on the screen. And I think that his response of talking to Malik about it and talking to TriHex about it was fine. And here's what should have ended this conversation. Okay, here to me is the biggest problem. After all of this happened, instead of saying, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that using this in this context was going to be bad, I'm just not going to do this again. I'm not going to use this emote. It now has a negative connotation when attached to me. What I would have done if I were him would make an apology, say he understood why it was inappropriate, explain why he understood it was inappropriate, and then said, I'm going to make my own emote, not a global emote. I'm going to make my own XQC salute emote. That's going to be my new salute, or I'm going to start using something else instead. Let's just move past this. Instead, he doubles down and is like, it's my emote. It's what I always do. It's like he associates his own personality with a global Twitch emote, which is like very bizarre to me, and that it's somehow his and his thing, and he's just going to keep using it. Why do that? Why? Right? You don't need to double down on that. You can simply change it into something else.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Like Malik said on Twitter, we talked about it, but what frustrated Malik was his response to the whole situation publicly was just so shit.
It's like he's in denial.
Yeah. And so like it's like all the goodwill. So he does things that make it appear that he has goodwill. He goes and talks to Malik and allegedly tries to understand him or apologize given the situation. But the result of his research or what he's doing is like completely wrong. It's like, no, doubling down on that was not the right move. It's like you say the casting is cancer, so we set up a time to have lunch, and he just doesn't show up. And then never messages me again. Like the follow-up is always so garbage.
Yeah. I mean, like he turned to
I don't know if you've noticed, Michael, but Monty's really bothered about him not making it to this lunch.
Well, it's a waste of my time. It's like,
obviously, yeah, I get it.
I have been, people are like, oh, why didn't you, the criticism I've been getting on why didn't you like DM him? I did DM him. It's like, why were you, insulting him? I was like, well, he was being an idiot on the internet. And that's kind of what I do, is I insult idiots on the internet.
That is a point I made very clear in my video, because it's actually something that seems to have been lost in current society, right? We can have discussions all day long, and probably should, about, what is racially sensitive, like what is inappropriate between like the different sexes, etc. But let's just be very clear. Until in 5 years they put in place some sort of social justice warrior law that puts me in prison, there is nothing illegal about being offensive or insulting to people over the internet. Like, yes, that person may be an asshole. You can say, hey, I don't think you should be mean and be rude and insulting to people. That's fine. Guess what? You're allowed that opinion. They're allowed to be insulting and offensive. But there's nothing illegal about it.
I wasn't even that insulting to him, unless you believe that being a personification of Twitch chat is a substitute for having a personality. Like, honestly, what I said was, you should be wittier because you could get away with more. You won't be punished. If you are creative enough in the way you say things, they're not going to be able to punish you. The reason why these issues, calling something cancer, is just like a shitty, like, internet way to deal or to call something bad that isn't appropriate. Spamming TriHard when Malik is on the screen is not appropriate.
Monty. I've got a question for you here. Wait a minute.
Sure.
It's not appropriate to call something cancer.
Let's just say that it has too many negative implications about in-game toxicity at this point, and it's just not necessary. Like, come up with a better phrasing.
No, I'm confused by this, genuinely, right? So, okay, it's actually a famous way that term is used in American sports is when someone's a locker room, like a terrible influence on the locker room, right? You say, oh, he's a cancer to that team, right? It's still used to this day in the NBA, the NFL, right?
I haven't heard commentators say that.
Oh, I don't know about commentating. I mean, maybe in that context, but he's a pro player. I've definitely heard pro players do it in real sports until very recently. Even.
I don't recall.
Now, here's the thing I don't get about that, though. Okay, right? Here's the thing. I understand why, in a modern context, you can't say, for example, like, oh, that team, it's so gay, in the sense that, gay means bad in like the gamer slang of 10 years ago. But that's because you're using gay as an association for bad, right? Cancer is the association for bad. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm on board with that. Like, isn't it bad?
Sure.
It's not pretty apt.
To be clear, I was not offended by what he said. I was just like, I just sort of rolled my eyes and was like, well, this is childish. And then I tried to get to the crux of the matter via DMs and setting up a meeting with him because I wanted to hear his opinions.
But here's the thing. The slippery... Oh, sorry, Michael, go on.
It's also the way like he's using it. Like the way he used it towards Monty and the casters is like publicly saying the casting of the official Overwatch League is cancer. You can't do that. Like if you're in game, you're playing, you just died to Junkrat and it was like a weird way and you hated it. Like, oh wow, that was cancer, you know? Like that's fine if he just says that on a stream, but you can't go and publicly criticize other players, teams, casters, say, oh yeah, LA Valiant, they're cancer, they're retarded, they're this and that. Like that's gonna be bad.
I would certainly say as a pro player, you probably shouldn't. Like, if you look at the way leagues run, I mean, I remember a classic example of this, right?
But people
I'll
are
just
going to
tell you, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say people will get like that. That's the implication that the casting is actually some sort of malignancy on the Overwatch league.
I don't think he was going that deep, surely.
I actually don't think he was at all. I think he just used it because it was a fucking throwaway comment that he didn't think about. I don't believe that he meant that, which is why I don't care. But I'm saying that the perception from the outside is different, right?
Yeah.
Because I will say, by the way, to give you a good example as well, like obviously, by the way, I mean, I'll actually go counter to Monty on this one. I think if you're a pro player and you want to criticize casters, do it. But by the way, you will absolutely pay a consequence yourself. Because, for example, people who think the casting is good. Oh, and by the way, here's another thing to think about. If you don't like the way the casting's done and you feel they're biased against you, right? You know what? When you complain publicly, some casters actually will go the other way and they'll try and be even fairer to you. I have to say, if I was a caster myself, if I already think you're shit and you're complaining about me saying you're shit, I'm gonna just have even more fun with it, mate. I'm gonna put more mustard on a hot dog next time. So it's not gonna, you're not gonna win out on that one. It's gonna be the opposite of what you want as the outcome. So if you want to work with a person, probably a good idea, yeah. But
and for the purposes of pro players who will inevitably watch this show, we as casters again want to have constructive criticism from you. You do not have to go to social media to give us criticism. You can literally just walk up to us or be like, hey, I don't like the way you're representing to me. And I am happy always to spend some time with you, sit down and have you explain things to me, because maybe there are things I haven't noticed, and then I will make my own decisions about whether it's valid and adjust my commentary accordingly. But our profession is to take this feedback, and you are a knowledgeable, it's not like you're a random pleb, you're a top player in the world. Even the worst players in Overwatch League are still vastly better than 99.9% of Overwatch players. So we still want to listen to your opinions and understand the problems that you're having, or contextualize. Sometimes it can be as simple as a player being like, well, you know, I'm dying a lot, but I feel like I'm not getting support from my team and I'm trying to shot call, but nobody listens to me. That's valuable information too, that contextualizes what we're saying. So feel free to come to any of us at any point in time and know that we are never against you. We are always pretty much on your side.
But the reason why I said before, though, that I don't think it's as clear that cancer is like a bad thing to say, is because that just puts people on the slippery slope where then people were trying to bring up when Dora used that like hilarious segment where he said like we have to like remove this tumor from the team or whatever. That is a great metaphor.
No, first off, let's be very clear. We never called him a tumor. So I've been getting a bunch of tweets saying like, you called XQC a tumor.
The implication was that though.
No. We said it could be healed by rest. Okay, so unless you believe that it's a fucking fictional disease of the hand was like, I was slapping myself, okay? Like, it was a fucking silly fake disease where I couldn't control my hand. It was like, I thought it was a clever sketch that we did, but we also said that it could be, you know, Doe was like, well, you know, sometimes it has to be amputated, but it can also be cured by rest. Okay, I don't think it was particularly bad, and people are now circle jerking saying that we said XQC was a tumor, which we did not say.
Okay,
did not say that.
still would have been an apt metaphor.
Well, perhaps you believe so.
I don't know I mean, this actually ties into the other topic really, but I don't know how we got to this world where like people interpret literally everything literally. I mean, you are aware not a single word that can ever be uttered could be literal, because even the word isn't the thing itself, it represents it. So
it's a sign.
It's automatically symbolic.
Well, if everybody studied semiotics, Thorin, the world would be a brighter place.
But I mean, in this particular scenario, like for example, if you use an analogy like, that player has been a cancer to this team, and you know, like his impact's been terrible and he should be removed. That's not in any way making light of cancer. It's not in any way implying that like cancer's a good thing. You're not doing any of those things. You're actually just using an analogy. You know. Look, likewise, if you say something along the lines of like, oh, the way he played was so ferocious, he was a tiger. You wouldn't be like, you've just called him an animal and said he is subhuman. No, you wouldn't do that, would you? It's an obvious metaphor. It's not a problem. You can use these things.
Of course, and I didn't take what XQC said literally, I bantered with him on Twitter. And if XQC, like you said, Thorin, you're not a professional player, you're never going to be that good, nor will I. But if you come into Twitter and expect, I am the GM fucking player of Twitter. I am the star Overwatch League fucking player equivalent of Twitter. If you're going to come into my world and try and beat me with words, you're not going to win. Right? So don't come there and do that. Just like I'm not going to go into the server and try and 1v1 you XQC because I know I'm going to lose. So,
Michael, what did you actually think about this whole thing with like I presume you know XQC as a person, you've been around the scene with him, etc.
Oh yeah.
Like when you first heard about this particular incident where people thought that because he'd used this emote, I mean, obviously there's a second topic which we can get into afterwards about like whether the emote itself is like inappropriate to use, but when you heard about this incident, was there any sort of concern like, oh, maybe he did do something racist, or maybe there's a part of him that's being shown to the public that is going to be a problem? What do you think about this?
I do think it's like a little unfortunate for him that it does seem like kind of got pinned as like someone who's kind of racist or being racist or has had racist thoughts or anything like that.
It obviously didn't help that he said the comments against Muma before, which I mean, like it's not the same thing, but it's another. It's in the same vein.
Like the punishment was warranted, regardless of the TriHard thing. The guy is just out of control. You know, he needs to learn to filter himself. But as for like the TriHard situation, there is proof that he has been spamming it in the chat way before Malik was part of the Overwatch League. So it's not like he was actively using it to, you know, say it when a black guy comes onto his stream or anything like that. So he's kind of being pinned as a racist. I think they could have worded it in the punishment a little differently.
I think that was a problem. I agree.
The wording of the whole punishment was completely not good.
But again, I think a lot of this could have been mitigated because it's not like he didn't have a chance. But his reaction to this, having, you know, people were like, oh, this is a problem. XQC spammed this at one time. He did explain himself and his history of using that emote. But he also, like, again, as I said earlier, why would you double down on the use of the emote after that when you can just apologize and then make your own emote, use a different emote, choose something else, be like, well, I might do. He could literally just say like, well, this might happen again where I'm on a stream or I'm watching Overwatch League and Malik is on again. I don't want to make this a continuous thing. I understand that wasn't the right thing to do at the time, even if it was accidental, which he claims it was. And this is something, I'm just going to change it. No, instead, he literally is choosing to die on TriHard Mountain. Who the fuck wants to die on TriHard Mountain?
Oh, I don't know. His damage control is just horrible. Like, he did good. He turned his stream on. He apologized. He said, yeah, I messed up, man. You know, stuff like that for about 5 minutes. And then he spent the 45 minutes after that just literally, like, going off on how LA Valiant's targeting him, how other people say things to him, how, you know, he got in an argument with you on Twitter and you were disrespectful too. And he just tried to defend himself to every degree as soon as he apologized. So, like, it just makes it look all ingenuine.
Who wants to die on TriHard Mountain?
There is something weird about how people actually do sort of coincide with the stereotypes about their role and character. So, like, for example, support players in like certain games often are the people who are like, you know, like, I want to make you the star. Like, you know, I'm a team player. Like, I'm part of the unit. You know, it doesn't matter even if they're the best usually. Like, the fact that this guy is a tank player is actually fucking hilarious. It's like he just needs to take abuse all day long. He actually takes pride in it. Like, he thinks he's good. Like, everyone's against him. You know, if everything goes badly, it was like unfair, the other team, it was full of bullshit, you know, like
everybody does target Winston first.
So he does. But everything XQC did is just so like stupid and avoidable, and
he also made it worse, which is the part he makes it worse.
This, I think the biggest problem is that he just, as soon as he does something, he just makes it worse immediately afterwards. So his apologies seem hollow, and if he does something bad, it turns into a giant drama storm, a giant drama clusterfuck, because he amplifies what he did poorly. And I think that is fundamentally the biggest problem here. And for people who are complaining that his punishments are too harsh, or it's not proportionate to what he did, or why is Taimu only getting $1,000 fine when XQC, obviously it's like the number of things XQC has already managed to do in the last. Overwatch League has only been around for 2 months, and this dude has already had 2 suspensions. What the fuck is that? You know? And it's not like the league, after his first suspension, didn't tell him what to do. They were like, can you please like stop doing this? Just can you please be quiet for a while? He chooses not to do these things.
Well, one other thing as well that I wanted to mention is I actually just want to pick up on what you said there, Michael, about like the wording. Like two things. This is a point I made in my video, but I want to make it again. One is this is something that's really disturbing to me, actually. This might sound like not a big deal because it's just a one-off thing with someone getting suspended. But I actually find this precedent that a bunch of esports leagues have now where they will say that you did something wrong, but they won't even say what you did. They won't say the thing you said or link to any evidence of it. They'll just tell you. They basically want you to just believe them completely. Like, oh, this person said something really bad, this like in this sort of a way, and so we've had to punish him. It's like, first of all, show me the rule that you are exercising right now. Secondly, show me what he said. Like, even if you have to censor it, so if the person said a slur, for example, just censor part of it so we can all fill in the blank. We all know what you're typing when you type those fucking hyphens instead of a letter. We can all guess the letter, right? So as a result, tell us what he did, because in this particular case, right, they said this. They said that one of the reasons why he was fined was, and these were the words, he said he'd used an emote, and this is the quote, in a racially disparaging manner on the league stream and social media. Now, if I saw that, I would literally, if you asked me to guess and I didn't know the circumstance, because remember, there's no information in this post, I would think like, fucking hell, what's he done? Like, is there some sort of like a Winston emote and then like he's putting like a fucking banana one next to it? Or is it something worse than that? Like, you know, the mind can run wild with imaginations of what he said. That could be worse than what he did. So in this particular scenario, whether it's a mild or a extreme thing the person did, just explicitly say what they did. Because like, as we've kind of alluded to before, in this particular incident, okay, you could probably say that he unwittingly was part of something bigger, which we'll get to next, about the fact that it's probably not cool to be doing that try-hard thing in that setting, but he explicitly did not do it in a racially disparaging manner. All evidence points to the fact that he didn't, and so to make it, let's say it like that, you're basically giving like a characterization which doesn't actually really line up with the facts or the circumstances. So I just find it a bit of a worrying precedent, because I could see a lot of ways that could go wrong, you know.
I agree, and I also think that almost all of this, almost everything that he did could have been fixed by simply dealing with it after the fact in a better manner. I think that if we actually get down to what I think that he did wrong, it was in handling the situations afterward, which I think is a lot harder to justify punishing somebody for. Right, it's a really complex topic.
I've got a question for you, Michael. But before we move to like the general try-hard topic part, I wanted to ask you something. As a player, right, this is one topic that we've often brought up on our past talk shows. Like in League of Legends, for example, Riot was a company that would actually fine people as well. Like famously, one thing they fined a bunch of people for was like account boosting. Another one was poaching players, you know. So when they would make these fines, one of the things we often discussed was like, when you do the fine, I want to get your take on this. Should the fine be something which is like the dollar amount should be set to specifically like hurt the player, like make him think like, oh fuck, I've lost a lot of money, therefore I'm not going to do it again? Or should it be like a certain amount and it gets applied to anyone? Like, for example, if I have a massive contract, do I get fined the same? Like in the NBA, you know, a tech is the same for everyone. The technical foul fine's the same. Doesn't matter if you're a bench player or you're a star player. So you could absolutely say in the NBA that the star player, well, I can tell you for a fact, they don't give a fuck if they get technicals. They literally had to make it eventually so that getting enough, you know, like cost you a game suspension before people cared, because the top players used to even have it in their contract. Like basically the league will just pay, my team will just pay my tech anyway, you know. So if you were a player and someone fined you $4,000, for example, would that actually make you stop something which was like habitual behavior or something you've done generally? Do you think the dollar amount actually has the impact as much as the suspension? What's your take on it?
Well, if the dollar amount is really high, right, then it's always going to matter if you're not getting paid a lot. But I think it will come down to like the suspension or that form of punishment. Are you banned for how long? That is like more impactful to you, because if you get banned for a month, like that's a long time of not playing, and you really start to, you know, look at your career and like, do you want to be banned for a month again? That'll scare you more, because like that's harming your entire career, right? Like your entire future, rather than just getting fined $4,000. Like, all right, fuck it, I'll just make it back, right? Keep playing. So I think the lengthy bans are more scarier.
I mean, let's be real. The dollar fine is nothing to XQC.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
$4,000 means shit to him. He's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year between his owl salary and his stream. He's one of the most popular streamers in Overwatch. He is maybe now the most popular
Probably
dedicated
cracking
Overwatch.
millions.
The thing is, though, Monty, that's
probably not
why
that much, but
that's
You
why
don't
I
think
brought
so?
up the fact that that's why I find the dollar one a lot trickier. Like the suspension one to me is good because I don't care who you are, you could be the best player in the world. Suspension means you don't play the game. That has the same impact on everyone. The problem with the dollar amount one is it gets into too vague an area. Like for example, I agree it's probably not for him, but then what do? We have to like look at his contract and go, well, for him particularly to really hurt him, this must be like 30
I
grand.
think
Because you know,
I
at that
agree.
point in time, it'd be an unfair precedent. It's like unfair and cruel and unusual punishment, isn't it? Because then you're not going to do that to the guy who's like the bench warmer of the worst team. You're not going to give him a 30k fine, are you? So
also, I'm sure the majority of his income comes from his streaming anyway. So
Yeah.
you can't take that into account either. I mean, I agree. I think I agree with Michael. Like I think the suspension for matches is much more punishing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, though, that gets us into another area before we move on, which is the tough one for me, which is if I'm a team, okay, there's a level at which where if someone gets suspended, I'm like, what the fuck? I didn't do anything. Why is my whole team having to suffer because this guy? So in that scenario, right, you might think to yourself naively, why doesn't Dallas Fuel just tell all these players don't ever tweet, etc., or like be careful what you tweet? Like the problem with that is at the same time, Overwatch League, I can guarantee you definitely wants players fucking tweeting and getting attention, and you know, like this is important to the league. You can't have people not having no personality, you know.
And I don't want people to feel like they can't banter with casters or anything like that too, because it disturbs me that part of this you know, suspension was like use disparaging language against Overwatch League casters. I think it sucks a lot of the fun out of the league. And like I said, people are welcome to banter with me on Twitter. People are welcome to, you know, make jokes about my casting. Like, that's fine. I don't care if pro players do that. Like I said earlier, if you want to come into my world of Twitter and try and banter with me, God bless you. I'll have a good time. I don't take it seriously. It's not going to offend me. And I don't think that players should be suspended or fined for attempting to do so.
Well, that's one thing that was also a bit worrying, also about how they, as you said, they worded it like disparaging against Overwatch League casters. Like, okay, I get it that these people work for Blizzard for the Overwatch League, and as a result, when on stream they represent Blizzard. But when they're on Twitter, that's different. Come on, like in that
also,
scenario,
most of us are freelancers, and we can handle ourselves. Like, I don't need you issuing suspensions. What I'm going to do is just make that player look like an idiot.
Like the point here is if he criticizes, like, okay, I'll give you a random example. Let's say some player criticizes Uber Shouts on Twitter, not in some like public setting, you know, like on the stream or whatever. If he does it on Twitter to Uber Shouts Twitter account, that says nothing about Blizzard. Like I don't think Blizzard should get involved in that unless it's something extreme. Like that's two separate people who are their own personalities interacting.
Yes,
and they
I think there are limits. I think KNG level of tweeting at you.
That's obviously over the line, but yeah.
That was way over the line. But I didn't, like I said, I think that this is only happening, and because it's hard because I feel like this doesn't do enough. This one statement of fines and bans doesn't do enough to provide the context as to why this happened to XQC. And I think why this happened to XQC was that it is not his first incident. He was thoroughly warned by the league about creating incidents in the future. He created multiple incidents back to back, and now this is the result. I think you take any of these things in isolation, and he responded to them poorly. I think if he improved his response to some of these things, it would have not been as bad. If it wasn't multiple incidents, if it was just one of these things and he had responded better to that one thing, then I think it would have been a different story. But it's hard to quantify it. For the scary thing is setting a precedent, right? You don't want to set the precedent where you can't banter with casters if you're a professional player, because I don't think any of the other casters mind, and I'm saying as a caster that I don't mind that. And I wasn't offended by what he said in the first place. I just thought he was being an idiot.
Right, okay, let's now just have the discussion about the module. Oh, sorry, go on.
What do you guys think about the other part of the ban that we didn't mention? Part of the punishment was because he was on Twitter, or not Twitter, his stream, and he was calling Fate like retarded, and he's He's an idiot.
Well, fellow players. Okay, we assume that's what it is. That's not actually in. That's not actually in the language of the suspension. It just says literally what it says: disparaging language against Overwatch League casters. We know what that one was because there was only one incident. And fellow players on social media and on his personal stream. Now, he did, as I understand it, I did not watch this, say that Fate was playing retarded. Now, I don't think he literally meant like somebody who has Down syndrome. I think what he meant was he was playing too aggressively in a way that could have been punished.
His wording was basically Fate is fucking retarded. That's what he said on the stream, which obviously we know he doesn't think he's retarded.
Yes.
Completely, but
here's my question about XQC. Just why do you do these things? Why? You don't have to say that. Just say something else. Just like
management isn't good.
Here's the thing, though,
or make a creative metaphor about Fate's play that isn't just resorting to tired phrases that you know people find offensive.
Yeah. I will say though on this one.
So like in my opinion, XQC's biggest crime is the crime of being boring. He's just calling things cancer and retarded. I'm bored by your commentary, XQC. You can do better. I know you can. Be creative. And you know what? If you're creative, it's a lot harder to punish you.
When I said earlier that if you build up a reputation like this, like I said, the analogy with the referees, if you're someone who gets into trouble with the referees a lot in a sport, they will now be hyper vigilant. And in fact, bearing in mind the ref can only look at so many places on a field, he's going to probably watch you all the time. And if he sees you do anything, you're probably going to get punished 10 times worse. And guess what? You'll be right. That guy, you know what? Some other player who's normally considered squeaky clean could get away with pushing a guy or tripping a guy. No one's looking at him. And even if they are, they give him the benefit of the doubt. I will say on the retarded one, I actually think this is an example of where XQC, unfortunately, previously has made his bed and now must lie in it, which is that, you know what? That is one of the most ridiculous double standards we have, which is that at no point in time has retarded ever become like a lot of slurs. It's never become one where everyone knows that's 100% off limits. In fact, I can tell you personally, you can use this term as long as it's not all the time. If you use that term occasionally, most times it won't be picked up on. Let's say like 95% of the time, it'll just go by. Most people will think, nah, whatever. But the problem is, in his particular example, you don't get any more. You haven't got any more get out of jail free cards, mate. So if you do it, people are going to pick up on it, and so that's why if you're him, you have to rehaul a lot of your whole attitude, unfortunately, because you're just not going to get away with it. Like, that's just a fact. I'm not saying it should be like that, but I can't do anything about it. That's the world we live in.
I understand why that people don't like that term being used, but it's also unnecessary to use it. Again, it's him falling back on like shitty gamerisms like cancer and retarded, as opposed to just coming up with something that is more specific to the situation that could be more descriptive than what he's doing. And it just draws all of this negativity and eyeballs to what he's saying and the league itself. And so I understand why these punishments have to take place, because he is creating a giant shitstorm where he knows he is under the microscope. He has been told by the league, we are carefully monitoring your behavior, and he continues to do this.
Oh, by the way, you might like this detail, actually, Monty, because since you brought up that term, this is something you might be interested in. There's a concept people can go and look up. Go and look on Google right now, and it's called the euphemism treadmill. And it was a term coined by this guy called Steven Pinker. And basically, this is why the term retarded is very different from any sort of a slur against a specific people or sex or whatever. Because what actually happens is, this is an example of how unfair society is, where society will keep changing rules in a way that actually isn't based on any sort of logic. So what happens with this, the reason it's called a treadmill, Monty, is because basically throughout all of like at least the 20th century, what happens is whatever word doctors use to literally mean someone is like subnormal mentally or developmentally. So for example, old examples were moron, imbecile. These were actually medical terms. These are not terms. Nowadays, they just mean, are you an idiot, right? But these were actual terms for people who had like an IQ of like 50 or whatever, you know, and couldn't do anything in their life. Here's what's interesting. When those terms get established by the medical professionals, colloquial use of those terms starts up, where people hear the term, so they then use it metaphorically to imply you are playing as if you have no brain, you are playing as if you are an utter moron, you are an imbecile, you know, all these terms. And what happens is, then in the modern day where we have political correctness, people then say, hey, you can't say that because that actually means like the medical term. So here's what's mad, Monty. This is the way it becomes a treadmill and feeds back into itself. So then medical professionals, because they hear the term being used all the time colloquially, they no longer want to use it in their work. So they come up with a new phrase. So for example, they change, like they make it like developmentally disabled. There's another one, or there's loads of them in England that they had, right? Like they had a term, spastic was literally a term that meant you had like the specific, I think it was Down syndrome, so you had the specific disorder. So then they changed the term, but then this is what's hilarious. Because the whole process for how people came up with the term was whatever the current medical term is, people then start to use the new term, so then the cycle just starts up again, and it will not only will continue, it will always continue. So unfortunately,
and then what happens is that like the terms 2 generations back become disassociated with the medical term and become acceptable to use.
That's why moron is okay to use now. It's fine.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, look,
it's just a complicated scenario, unfortunately.
I don't really want to get into a discussion about like the specific terms that XQC was using, but what I will say is that it should be obvious to XQC that those terms are not socially acceptable to use, and that if you are under a microscope because you have been told by the league that you are under a microscope for your behavior, just avoid those. Just, it's not worth it.
I'm pretty sure nothing is obvious to XQC. He's a man of
it does seem that way.
You know, there's a lot of things to break down with that. Okay, let's go into this then. So, Michael, what do you think about this? Like, here's the problem. I'll fully admit, I have actually never particularly cared about streaming or streamers. If I watch a stream, I literally turn all the chats off, no matter what streaming platform it is. I don't type in the chat. I just watch the game, and that's about it. For me, a game that's on a stream is just a live game. That's the only difference between that and a VOD. So I will say I don't personally participate in emote and Twitch chat culture anywhere. Like, I don't really get it, you know. I also am not someone on my phone generally uses emotes that much, so I'm not really one of those people who, like, you know, that's how I express how I'm feeling or whatever. I tend to just type what I'm thinking. So with all that said, as someone who is younger than me, is part of this culture, etc., right, have you ever heard of this thing that people use the TriHard emote when black people are on screen? Is that a famous thing?
I had no clue. Honestly, like,
I
was out of the Twitch culture for a while. I just got into it like the past maybe 4 months, like this year.
Okay.
I didn't even know the TriHard Mountain, what the fuck it was. I just started seeing like Sinatra and XQC use it all the time. And I had no idea why they were using it, what they were trying to express by using it. Like, they would literally host people on their streams and they'd be like, yo, go spam TriHard when I host them or something.
Okay.
So
have you ever heard of it before, Monty, in this kind of a context? Was it a thing you'd heard of?
No.
Because that's the weird thing, right? The reason why I ask.
But again, I'm like you, so like literally, I don't give a fuck about. I very rarely watch players' personal streams. I'm not invested in like professional players or a particular players' stream culture, and I don't watch it with chat.
Okay.
And
but I mean, the reason why
I just watch esports, so
the reason why I genuinely asked that, though, because I wanted to know, like, if you just said yes, Michael, I wouldn't be like, you liar, I've never heard that. No, I'd take that into account. Is because this is unfortunately another trend, which is whenever anyone thinks like, oh, we've caught this guy, he said the thing we're all not allowed to say, they then have to always try and make the case that like everyone knew this is wrong to make your crime worse, right? Like, oh, everyone knows you don't say that. It's like, do they? I wasn't even aware of this as a thing, you know. Like, I could, like, by the way, if you'd asked me to guess, I could already tell you when you create emotes that this is how people would use them. Like, I know what the internet is like and what anonymous people are going to do on streams, so
sure.
I could have warned you that, but I didn't know it was like a famous thing. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, some people implied it's been done before, but I certainly wasn't aware of it. So the reason why this is important is I don't know if you're XQC, if you'd necessarily know that like this is what people are going to think if you type that in the chat at that moment, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like, I watch Overwatch League. I watch every broadcast, and I never even noticed the chat spamming tryhards when Malik was on, because I guess I never looked at the chat or something.
But
I had no idea what was going on.
Well, that's the other thing I want to ask, and this is a genuine question. I'm not asking this as like a loaded question, right? When people do spam the TriHard face when he is on screen, or when Golden Boy is on screen, or anyone who's in any way black is on screen, and they're doing this emote which is of a black person. By the way, you'll note I purposely said there, an emote of a black person. It is not a black person emote, as in it is not meant to only represent black people. Like, the logic was not only that black people can use it and that it is always about black people. It's supposed to be whatever the expression that guy is doing, I assume, is the naive way it was created, and that's what they want it to be used for, right? When they do that, do you actually think that some people are doing it in a racist manner? Do you think, like, I mean, the real logic of it's supposed to be it's sort of like a weird, cringy face or something, right?
I mean, I agree with what Richard Lewis, I think, put out on this, which is that I'm sure some people use it in that fashion. I think it's just a childish, and I think many people use it as a childish and sort of just like, for me, disappointing way to point out that there is somebody of a certain ethnicity on the screen, whether it's like Mingli or TriHard or whatever emote is used, which I don't think I don't think it speaks very highly of the community or the people who are engaging in Twitch chat. So but again, you can't possibly know what everyone's motivation is that is typing that in the chat.
I mean, I would assume myself.
I would prefer if it didn't happen by a lot. That's something I would like to not have happen anymore, but you can't say what everybody's motivation is, you know?
Like, I would certainly assume that, like, even, like, first of all, I mean, who knows? If there's enough people watching a stream, I'm sure there's a few people who are just racist anyway. But I would assume of the people doing it, like if you have like 50 people do it, I'd assume some people are doing it to sort of be like, haha, this is a way I can sort of get away with doing an edgy, borderline racist thing, but without
shitty.
really,
it's just without a shitty
really
thing to
being
do.
able to catch me. You know, I would assume some people are doing that, but I think it's pretty unreasonable to imply that, you know, everyone knows it's explicitly racist and is only using it for a racist reason. That's why people think I was trying to make like a straw man by being like, but what if a black person uses it in chat when a black person is on screen? Now that's not that's not an argument from bad faith. I literally mean it. Like, are we just not allowed to use any emote of the race of the person on screen if they're on screen? Like, I agree, some people are probably using it in a rude manner, but you see the sort of murky territory we're getting into now, where we're like policing the emotes people use.
But I think this is a really complicated conversation that has to be had by Twitch, and I think Richard Lewis was right that this has been sort of festering under the surface of Twitch for a long time.
Yes.
And they've never really addressed it. And I don't know how you do address it, honestly, because of the reasons that you're saying.
Here's the sick thing, Monty. I mean, I'm not throwing Twitch under the bus here, but put it this way: I in a way, they want people to spam emotes. They want people to engage with the chat. So there's a level to which Richard's implication there is a bit sinister that they sort of never addressed it, because they must sort of know that part of how people are engaging with that is sort of a bit, to the very least, kind of mean, right?
I just don't. I think that the spamming of the TriHard chat, when like, because it's used so heavily when a black person is on the screen, and because of the previous incidents that Richard mentioned about this being used like really horribly for like that Hearthstone tournament that he was bringing up, I do think like I don't find it appropriate. I find it juvenile. I don't like it. But at the same time, removing the emotes doesn't do anything, because like, what are we supposed to do? Only have white people emotes? Like,
yeah.
What the fuck is that? That's not a great environment, obviously. What was your point?
I made a point that you'd have to go further. You would have to remove everything that is an animate creature. Because if you had only animals there, people would use the animal, and then they'd go, wow, so you're implying he's an animal. You know, it would just go to the ends of the earth. But you'd have to only have, like, you know, pencil, a fucking rock. You can't have fruit, remember, because people will imply that's racist. So eventually we're going to have no emotes left, are we? Like,
well, I don't think that taking away the emotes is the answer, because it can be reduced to that level, like you're saying, but it would be, and also, like you're saying, if those emotes are used while somebody of that ethnicity is on the screen, then you end up with, even if it was for the expression of the emote, as opposed, or the like sort of understood meaning of the emote, rather than just because of their ethnicity, then you have a situation where you can never use that emote with somebody of a certain race. But I think in this case, because this, you know, Malik said this has been going on for 3 years with him. where the TriHard emote just gets spammed. He brought it up on the broadcast. I thought he actually owned it really well on the broadcast, where he was like, when you're done spamming those TriHards, and I think that's the way to make it go away, is to sort of put it into the light and call attention to that fact. But how do you deal with this in a specific context if you're Twitch? I don't know.
Here's the sad thing, Monty.
It's such a hard thing to handle.
I agree with you. The best way people who aren't in control of what literally emotes we can see, like Twitch and the people who have the stream, the best way for the rest of us to actually make it stop is just to make it uncool. Now, I will agree, an extreme way to make something uncool is to label it racist, but the problem with that is you obviously get into this murky territory where, as I said, who was the ethnicity of the person posting it? Is it racist? Is the context, it's unfortunately in this scenario, this is why it's kind of an absurd conversation to have, is that, remember, you could have 400,000 people watching the stream, but if 5 people spam this emote, suddenly we have to have a massive debate about racism. Like, those 5 people don't represent the other 400,000.
No, they're just idiots.
and if you get, by the way, I can tell you from my own following, you don't even need 400,000. Just get like 10,000 people. I can show you 1,000 idiots in 10,000 people. Come on, man. So if you have 400,000, you know what? By that logic, there's actually very few racists in the fucking scene. The ratios are pretty fucking fire.
I think this is a really difficult topic to talk about what is right and what is wrong. But what I do think you can do is provide alternatives. I think the way that Malik handled it on the stream, saying that, like, once you're done spamming those tryhards, makes it seem like sort of tired, and calls attention to it in a way that I would hope would encourage people not to do it any longer. But honestly, having taken a look at Twitch chat that was going on with the Overwatch League after this happened, obviously when Golden Boy comes on, people spam what face because it's actually a picture of him. So my suggestion on Twitter was, I said, how about we just make emotes of all of the people who are on camera of the Overwatch League, the hosts, the analysts, the casters, and so people could spam the caster's face, allow us for the Overwatch League chat to have specific caster or host or interviewer emotes. And so people can just spam those instead. So if people want to spam literally Golden Boy or literally Malik or literally Doa when they come on screen, then let them do that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Especially because obviously that then separates out people who just want to say, haha, black person, look at this black person emote, versus people who just want to say, look, it is Malik, and then do the Malik one.
I think that would solve a lot of the problems, personally.
Also, by the way, I'll just speak on behalf of all the casters here. Cop Malik and Monty in on some of that fucking skrill for those emotes. Just give them a little share. That's all
I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that.
Just make it so that being a sub on the channel, gets you the emotes, and then they get a little cut back, a little kickback.
Sounds great to me.
I think we solved it.
If you cheer, if you use your bits for cheering like you do for the teams, maybe Monty gets some of that. I'm just saying, that'd be good. That way, there's a way for you to directly support the casters and talent on the broadcast that you're a fan of. That'd be cool. I would like that.
See, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a system. I'm going to create my own cryptocurrency where people can support casters and players in the Overwatch League. And what it's going to be generated is every time XQC says something stupid, it's going to generate another coin. And so it's going to be a very complicated economy, and you're going to have to really stay ahead of all the drama to know where this cryptocurrency is going. But we can all make millions, I'm telling you, if you want to get it now. I'm going to say, I personally am not going to own any of the coins. I'm mainly just going to take all you guys' money, and then I'm going to give you the coins. But if the coins, I think the coins are going to go crazy. So you guys get on board with all that. Like, I'll just keep your money though, the real money, like the actual. I mean, to be fair, that's a fiat currency anyway. But I'll still take my fiat currency over any imaginary cryptocurrency in the world, quite frankly. So,
I think that's a wise move.
Michael, do you have any final comments on this topic? Or are we done?
Nah,